tell you, you're not going to have a war with me, and you're not going to have a third world war with me. That I can tell you.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, March 1st, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. It's definitely an important follow-up. There's a lot of stories that we were covering yesterday that are very important to follow up on and make sure we're seeing the developments. A couple of quick points to make in the beginning. There's some important things that we discussed yesterday. One, Kamini being killed. The reporting has clearly continued in the direction of that he has been killed. We'll touch on that as we go through on the other parts we may, that I may discuss on different thoughts of, continued objectivity. And as well as the, make sure I just want to get these out right in the beginning. There was the other example that I wanted you guys to hear in regard to, I guess I put it in the title in general, but to know that the offer, the offer of a ceasefire was reported by the Israeli media. And it was just a title character issue, and ultimately wanted to include that. But the point being, and this is something that Israel has reported. And I find that to be more relevant than usual because of the way the Israeli media operates with most of the stuff today. But what we're going to be covering today is the continuation of the attack on Iran, the continuation of the coverage of the illegal reality of all of it and what it's leading to. Now, there's a lot of other, I guess, considerations in this conversation that we're going to get into today about the questions that we should always be asking about things that might be false, about manipulations deeper than just what we can see, about whether, for example, Donald Trump is being tricked or forced or coerced or strong-armed into this action. And then on top of that, whether this action itself might be Trump saving us from something. It's certainly an interesting thought. Now, what I would argue is that even if that is where we are, it shows you two things. That, like we've all been telling you, that Israel is clearly controlling this government and dictating policy. So as you have Republicans who are now saying that it was Trump didn't have a choice because it was a nuclear threat. Oh, okay then. Well, that's exactly what we've all been telling you, right? And it's not about one person. It's not Trump versus Biden, and that's the game that's played. It's about Israel influencing policy. They make it about Trump. So what's interesting first is that's what's being highlighted. But then two, it clearly shows you that Israel, or at the very least that Trump, is vulnerable to the pressure from Netanyahu in particular, or the idea that simply that Donald Trump can be pressured from a foreign government to take actions that will put Americans at risk. And how is that America first? I think it's very important that we consider the evolution of the narrative, not just what's being put in front of us in the moment. And how I often point out the lies and how they evolve and how clearly Israel, more than anybody these days, how clearly that shows you what we're looking at. But if that is the case, it's important. It is an important moment for Americans to truly understand where we are. That a president of the United States can effectively be blackmailed, threatened, coerced into a position where not only we're on the cusp of a major, let's be real, we're already within a major war. Call it what you will. It meets the metrics, as I've said for years, of a world dynamic. But that Americans will continue to fight these wars for these foreign powers, and it will continue a cycle, if we allow the two-party illusion to continue, if you understand where I'm going, that will never end. Because right now we're in this kind of interesting point where a lot of things are changing. And I'm seeing a lot of things that are changing, as I've been trying to highlight, that are really just about ensuring that the people, the entities, whatever you want to think is ruling factions here, to continue that control. But under your guise that's changed. And that's everything we see today. And there's a lot of other important information we're going to get to around the nuclear allegations, the partisan game, and the lies that are just unprecedented coming out right now. And really, I think on top of that, where this will go outside of all of the partisan conversation. What is the outcome to all of this? What should have been thought about beforehand, and not just some argument that we'll get this done quick, or whatever the same things we hear every time. What does this look like? Let's just say they get what they want. Does that make the world a better place? Look at Syria, look at Iraq, look at these are objectively worse situations than what they were before. Not, of course, if you listen to the U.S. government, who will always rationalize its destructive and chaotic actions. Well, that's where the Shah comes in. That's where the MEK come in. All these very objectively bad people who are now being put forward as the possible solutions. By the way, that the Iranian people don't want at all. So let's start, of course, with a couple of points I don't want you to miss that is always how this goes. As this is continuing, as the world's distracted, whether it's a Christian holiday or some other bombing, whatever it is, something Israel notices is going to distract Americans, they intensify their disgusting actions elsewhere in the world. In this case, with settlers in the West Bank and in Gaza. Now, we said this at the end of the show yesterday. They immediately went back to basically a full-on, to be clear, they never stopped what they were doing in Gaza. But they at least announced a repositioning of the worst parts, the complete military control of the area or whatever they called it. Hadn't really changed, to be honest, but they're now at least feeling the momentum enough to be able to state that, or at least use the momentum to hide that, or however you would look at it. The point is, they're now claiming right back to square one in Gaza. Now, here in the West Bank, and I'll read what they wrote about it, a thread of today's settlers' attacks on Palestinian town of Douma. Around 11 settlers invaded Bedouin community with their goats, all while Iranian missiles are flying overhead. They were armed with guns, batons, pepper spray. Now, in case you're confused, this happens every single day over there. But what I want to show now is that it's ramped up to a degree that I haven't seen. And there's a lot of, I'm forgetting the guy's name. I should have grabbed him for this. He's somebody that's been in the West Bank doing a lot of good work. He's kind of an activist, like just doing his blonde hair. He got beat up in one of these times. Basically, he's out there showing this. And he's been demonstrating an increase in all this as well. But on top of that, Breaking the Silence points out, yesterday morning, we woke up to rocket alerts. Israel began bombing Iran. As often happens when the media attention shifts, Israel seized the moment to intensify its attacks against Palestinians. And here's what happened while the world was looking the other way. And, it's worth understanding. It's just the same stuff we're always reporting. Every single thing you could talk about. The Israel will ramp up its aggression against Lebanon. It'll ramp up its aggression against what it's doing in Syria and to Syrians in Syria. It always goes the same way. And it frustrates me that it's that obvious, and yet, like everything else, it continues to be debated and argued. And, which, to be fair, we should always be debating. But the idea that we're talking about something that is something even Netanyahu has admitted to, or like examples like that, or what's going on with Gaza, for crying out loud, that we can even pretend like for example, we can clearly debate whether it meets the metric of genocide. That's a fair argument, because we may have a subjective difference on what we think that, but they're killing people. It's against the law. And we can all see that. And I don't know anybody arguing they're not doing that. So it's important to just break through all the nuance of the conversation when it comes to things that we're understand, like basic realities of the situation. Now, we talked about this on yesterday. U.S. Israel illegally bombed Iran, killing over 100 school children. Now, that was one of the things I was going to include to start, in case you missed the rest of the show, is that ultimately the bombing of the school has been verified. And in my opinion, it was very easily shown early on that they lied about how it went down, trying to blame it on Iran. But now, based on geolocation, it's pretty clearly shown that this was exactly what it was originally discussed as. And let's be clear, it was also reported from, not that mainstream media makes it true, but a lot of what anybody in the mainstream conversation would call reputable media, telling you that that's ultimately what happened. And they're still lying about this. And this was the beginning. This is a choice to bomb a school full of children. In the beginning, the first act, guys. Keep that in mind as we go through all this, as we take one quick point to discuss the AI discussion and from that bombing point, things we discussed yesterday. But think about what that means. What are they telling the world? What is Netanyahu trying to demonstrate? They know we're paying attention, right? They know we're looking more than ever, in fact. And his first move is to bomb a school full of children? I don't even think I need to explain. Whatever the message would be, it sends a very clear feeling, right? We can do what we want. We want you to know that we can do what we want. And we're going to go so as far as to just murder a bunch of children to make that statement. And then so Iranians know too, if you do anything else, we're going to kill more children. And they sit back and just lap up the U.S. blind coverage of how that works. Now, in the AI point of this, understanding the reality of how immersive AI is in the foreign policy discussion, but also just everything that the U.S. and the West largely are driving into the world. And reality being it's going to happen. China's doing the same thing, but just from the Western perspective. It's important to understand where this played a factor in the recent bombing. Now, I really want to talk about this a lot, and I've been putting off the Anthropic AI U.S. government point in the conversation, for probably a week and a half. And it's been going on much longer than that, but it jumped on my radar when it was being discussed. And I was thinking, I can't believe that they're actually trying to force this company, whatever you think of them, whatever you think their guidelines are, it's a company. They can do it. And they're saying you have to do these or this way because the U.S. government demands it. National security. And of course, when you look into the story, as we'll read right now, it turns out that their real demands from the Anthropic side were, we don't want you to use this to kill people or make autonomous AI weapons. Oh my God, what a bunch of woke monsters, right? And then you could read what their actual charter thing said that they're all complaining about. Do we not realize that people have different views on the world? The idea that what you can read in that and then argue that, first of all, even means woke, to argue that you care about other people's perspectives. I'm not even going to say I agree with the way they frame that, but to call it woke is just dumb. It's lazy. But on top of that, that it doesn't mean that they're therefore some kind of radical leftist, whatever they turn that into. But on top of all of that, has nothing to do with the fact that they don't want the U.S. government to use it for the purposes that Israel's using it for now in Gaza. And that's their red line. And you call them bad for that? Instead of acknowledging the fact of that, you call them woke and ignore, even if they are woke, that doesn't remove the fact of what you're talking about and trying to accomplish. And so on top of all of that, they then used Anthropic during the bombing of Iran. After they just told the world that there was a woke, disgusting company that we don't need and we don't care about, and we're going to demand that they stop and we're going to blacklist it, and then they use it. If it's not just a perfect example of exactly who we're dealing with, whether it's Trump personally or Biden or the government as a whole, these people have no scruples. They have nothing is sacred to them. It clearly was necessary, so they said, who cares? U.S. government used AI tools from Anthropic during the air attack launched on Iran. And this has been widely reported, Wall Street Journal, plenty of others, after declaring that it would stop using technology from AI startup, from Anthropic. As per a report for the Wall Street Journal, commands around the world, including the U.S. command center in the Middle East, used Anthropic's Claude AI during the Iran attack. Of course, right after Elon was making this whole big point about why his Grok was the only one that made the right answers, but then they used the woke one. It's funny how that works. So clearly it's not that important. And, or at the very least, your warmongering agenda was more important than caring about woke stuff, right? Funny how that works out. Reportedly, in case you missed my facetious tone, you know my opinion about this, guys. I don't think the woke point, I don't think any of them, Biden or Trump or any of them, care truly about the woke, like the points of pronouns. Some of them within the political sphere do. They buy into these things, and I don't think most of them are truly in the know of what's going on. But at the end point, do you really think that they're fighting wars for woke pronouns? Do you really think this is a means to an end? And it's things like this that make that point for you. So if the reverse point is Trump's fighting those things, then why would it be cast aside because of their interest now? Because it's not important. It's all a bunch of, it's stuff to divide you amongst yourselves. That's what it comes down to. That doesn't mean that point is not relevant or important in a general sense. Of course, we shouldn't be forced to say things or use pronouns that they demand, whatever it is, or transgender conversations. It's not the same as saying those things aren't important in our lives, but the governments and whether they care about that accomplishment versus using it to meet their ends is the point. And it's everything. In every conversation, Reportedly continuing, the command used Anthropic's AI for intelligence assessments, target identification, and simulating battle scenarios. With, of course, with their woke slant. Of course, that was okay. I'm done joking. Prior to the Iran attack, another Wall Street Journal report had revealed that Anthropic's AI was also used by the Pentagon during the capture of Maduro. So clearly, they totally do want it. They totally do need it. And they just wanted this. Again, it's a layer of just petty dishonesty within the larger dishonest narrative, which is that they, instead of going, well, we want this group, but they don't want to meet our demands, so we're going to move on to something else, which is what an adult would say. They don't get their demands, and so Trump stomps his feet and goes, they suck anyway, and they're woke, and we don't care, and then uses them. You have to laugh at that. It's embarrassing for him. We don't need it, he says. We don't want it, and we're not going to do business with them again, and then used them. This was, so many days ago or recently. There will be a 6-month phase-out period for agencies like the Department of War who are using Anthropic's products at various levels. Now, obviously, that would mean that they are, in a way, there's 6 months where they would still be using it. So that's why. But my point is still the same, is that if it's about the woke point, it shouldn't matter, especially if you're arguing it's some kind of invasive Democrat, whatever they're trying to make it out to be, as opposed to a whole of government problem. Pentagon and Anthropic had been arguing for months over how the company's AI models are used in national defense. The AI startup said that it had allowed the U.S. DoD to use Anthropic technology for purposes with 2 exceptions. And this is the only issue, guys, the only real issue, because they were happy to use it as before, right? They're all making a big issue about their woke mindset and they didn't care until this red line was drawn. Funny how that works. And it says there are 2 exceptions: mass domestic surveillance. Palantir's totally okay with that. And America and fully autonomous weapons. Palantir's also okay with that. And so the problem becomes they won't allow us to use their AI to murder people and to break the law. So they're bad people and they're challenging national security. I mean, guys, this is almost embarrassing today how ridiculous all of this is. It's always been like this where they're lying about what they're doing. And, but it's just at a level where it's either because these people are so shockingly incompetent, they can't even deliver lies properly, or somebody wants to see all this. That's what I would argue makes the most sense, but I'm sure there's more to consider. Anthropic has also challenged the U.S. designation of the company as a supply chain risk. Why would it be a supply chain risk? Because they don't want you to use weapons, AI weapons, to kill Americans or to kill people, or autonomous weapons or surveillance. How would that be supply chain? Well, there's one easy answer to that, because their supply, their chain is based on, let's put it this way to make that not confusing. The industry and the way this government and the world seems to be going is AI and surveillance and technology. And that means what they need this for is their supply chain. They need this. Everything else is probably side discussions. Now they're building their AI world. And I think that's what Trump sees as his kind of, I'm going to create the new global order around my AI control structure. Funny how that's exactly what we were all fighting 30 seconds ago. But I'm going to talk about that a lot more. I have tons of stuff to pull into it, but it was very relevant to today, and thinking about the lies around a lot of this and how it does play a factor. Now, another point about AI that I'm really not going to take much time on, because it appears more and more that this is some sort of a weird anomalous point that's not relevant to the real, let's just simply say, to Iran's bombing of Trump or of the U.S. government. But there's something about this that I find just simply interesting, whether or not it's relevant. But on top of that, I get a sense that there's another very real agenda around whatever we're touching on here. And that is whether it's just AI manipulating video and audio and whatever else, or deepfakes or whatever. Those are all very real and important conversations. So when this came up, I thought this was fascinating. Oh, you know what I forgot to grab? It's in yesterday's show, but the woman who basically broke this down, and she's pretty much the only person that was the one that carried this conversation, saying that this video was AI. It was a deepfake. Now, and I had no other indication other than some interesting things she pointed out to think that, and I thought it was relevant to bring it up yesterday. And it still seems to be sort of weirdly confusing today based on even what Grok will say. So let me show you this. Now, this is really just interesting to me. And I want to stress that. I don't even really think this is, in a real sense, some kind of a deeper point about Iran, like it's not really happening or whatever else. But consider those things. But more so to make it simple that maybe this was something, if this is the case, that they do all the time. Because Trump was tired. And I'll make that point at the end again. Seems like they just put out another recorded video. So maybe this is about something like that. Or maybe because they're all vain and petty, that they made the video, edited it, and then brushed up his face. I'm dead serious, by the way, or whatever else. And then Grok and whatever else gets, it looks like that was AI or altered because it was technically manipulated. See my point? But all that aside, 8-minute video came out of Trump telling you all the things he told you about Iran. Now, a lot of people have sent me this stuff. Because after yesterday, I went over this and they're getting the same responses. So first of all, somebody asked, is it AI? And Grok said, no, it's not. It's a real video from President Trump. And then they asked again, like, well, I have other AI sources saying that they are. Are you sure? And Grok responded, upon double checking with additional sources and analyzing video frames, strong indicators that it was an AI generated video. Now, this is not for you to verify since it's just a screenshot somebody sent me, but I'll go into more of it. But I showed this yesterday and I'll show the links to it. And what I find interesting about it is, one, again, just an interesting kind of secondary point, is that Grok and the rest of these things are so ridiculous and subjective and manipulated. And that's often why I include it, for the point of showing how it is used in a partisan way, but ultimately is still completely subjective, but still interesting, right? It's like pointing to another source saying, well, they disagree with you. I'm not going to blindly trust the source. It's just one more data point, right? And what's interesting is that you can manipulate this. You can kind of work through it and get it to make certain arguments, and people abuse that. But all that being said, there's still something about this that sort of stands out to me. So I asked it again today. Now look at my last show. It's all included. This is another one that I said is just using his tweet. And I said, is this the full 8-minute video? Is it AI? And I said, yes, the video in that X post appears to be AI generated, or at least heavily manipulated deepfake. Now, again, that literally could just be that they brushed up his face or, made it an AI thing because he didn't want to do it. Maybe nothing more than that, right? And that's something they can do. And that would mean it's really just a nothing burger, right? But they listed all the same things, inconsistent lighting and natural jerky movements and blah, blah, blah. Okay. I thought that was interesting because people are being told it says no. Then I asked it again. Well, I asked, is there anyone talking about the fact that Trump's recent late night Iran speech was a deep fake? And it says, no, there's no real engagement. And then I asked it, but was it a deep fake? And it said, no. I was like, I literally just asked you this. And when I'm right here, you just told me that it was a deep fake. And it says, that's not true. And basically denies that. I said, well, no, this is exactly what you said. It's right there. Yes, it is a deep fake. And he goes, upon review, I see what happened. It says this is a real point, but it was because it was a single clip that I misread. And I said, no, you didn't. That's not true. You actually literally showed the whole thing. And I go on, it's just weird to me. Now, again, I just find this interesting. All of it to the end of the point was I said simply again, it was not a specific clip. It was the full thing. Why are you basically said, why are you wrong about your own responses? And at the end of the day, it simply said, oh, well, there's, it says, you're right. It's fair to question this. It was a bit odd. I'm not going to dodge that. So I'm like, what a weird response, right? And you go through, read it all if you want to take the time. My thing on all this is I get the sense that there's something, maybe not even connected to Iran, like I'm saying, but something more about what's going on here. And that Grok is grappling with trying to give you an answer that it can't, maybe because it's broken, maybe because there's somebody behind the scenes manipulating things. I don't know. I found it very interesting. And then I saw this today, Politics and Poll Tracker, a new pre-recorded address. And remember Trump's 8-minute video? There's a cut. And they tried to make it clean, but you could tell there's like an edit, not an AI thing, but like an edit, which to me speaks to, like I said yesterday, less likely to be an AI. But a edit. So maybe that's what it's picking up on, right? Or whatever else. And it says a new pre-recorded address to the nation. Trump says military operations in Iran will continue until all our objectives are achieved. Now I'm going to come back to that point later in the show. I just wanted you to see the point about the edited video. Seize, take back your country. So I find it interesting. Now I wanted to include that just for getting it on the record. We can come back to it later because we are going to get into a world of AI, everything, deepfake, everything. I mean, we're basically there and I don't think we even notice it yet. So I'm wondering what we're picking up on here, but I'll leave it there. Now, and just in case you missed all of that, the evidence right now seems to point to that it's a real video, which I don't even think was necessarily debated for most of you, but it's important to put that out in case you didn't get what I was saying and all that. I'm not claiming that it's necessarily deep fake. My gut tells me it's more that it was somehow altered in some way, and that's what we're picking up on, but who knows? Now, Kamini was the other point about him being killed. Now, yesterday, remember, it was in the middle of the show. And at that point, there was, I think it was the foreign minister was saying he's alive as far as we know. And that other Iranian media, which by the way is, drenched, is just infiltrated all over the place with U.S., Voice of America, Iran, or whatever it is, or, the different, or Israeli fake Iran. There's a lot of fake Iran headline, with the Iran banner that are completely not Iranian media. Same everywhere in the world, by the way. Same thing here. But that's to say that the reporting was coming out, and so we should question it because they've reported they've killed him before, and they lied. They reported they've killed a lot of people before, and they've lied. Baghdadi, for example, I don't think they ever found his body last time, and that was like the 7th time they said that. The point, though, is that we should always be objective like that and make sure we're careful. And then I saw somebody told me in the chat, Robert reported it, and to me, that made a lot more in my mind likely that's the case. Then today, I even saw another report coming out saying that somebody was claiming he was still alive. But it looks like it was maybe of a late report. But so at where we're at right now, it started yesterday. What I read the first report that said he was moved somewhere secure, which suggests that he wasn't in the location that was bombed with all of them. But of course, that could have been a lie because they want to make sure people don't, it's all about maintaining the idea that you're strong, right? But so all that said, now today, most of these people involved with this are saying that he was killed, including main Iranian accounts. Now, the only thing I want to add to this is that other than it be most likely that he was killed, like 99%, is that right now, it's interestingly possible to me as an anomaly that maybe he didn't get killed and he's just keep using this as a tactful tool until something is it would be really interesting, wouldn't it, if a week from now, it turns out that he wasn't killed and it gives them some kind of strategic advantage? Think about that. But all that to say, just for sake of consideration, Saeed Mohammed Marandi and even the Kamini account themselves are telling you that he was killed. We've always been prepared for martyrdom, and we stand against the corrupt Zionist Epstein class. That's going around quite viral right now, by the way. I find that very interesting. The Epstein wars and Epstein class, Think about how frustrating that is for Trump and the rest of them. Now, the fact that they killed him has to be pointed out that, we're talking about under the guise of peace talks, just like last time, just like in Lebanon, just like Soleimani. These are vile people we're talking about. I mean, there's nothing sacred. That means nobody anywhere will ever have any faith in any kind of peace talk because they're willing to just go, hey, everybody come together, and then they bomb them all. Soleimani, they literally offered a peace talk and they bombed him in the Iraqi airport. In Lebanon, they offered a deal where they had to come together to meet the new demands, and then Israel bombed all of them in that room. Same thing last time where Trump offered a deal and Iran came together and then Israel bombed. Now this time, I honestly don't know why everyone's still falling for this, quite frankly, but this time it seemed there was a little bit of difference, but they were being very careful. And then Trump, the same thing, said there is a deal where they need to address the details. And that's when Israel attacked. This has all been covered. They're boasting about this. And so what we're talking about is people who are using what is supposed to be some kind of a sacred middle ground for somebody to have. These are the belligerents, guys. The fact that every single time Iran comes to the table and tries to, even if they're doing it dishonestly, and then what you see is the other side taking advantage of that. That's what they were just saying yesterday, is Iran is recognizing that their restraint is only going to be used as weakness. So they've effectively created the world that they're telling you they're trying to stop, probably by design, so they can forever point to the other side and say, they're the reason we're always in this forever war. And if it's always forever war, then we'll never know for sure. And it only benefits the people who want war. And show me where Iran sees conducting war. Show me where they're invading other countries. Show me where they're doing any of the things they're talking about. I would even challenge you to prove to me that they're in fact doing any of the things they claim they're doing. I mean, like even the proxy element conversation. There's allies, sure, and I'm not even going to disagree. They're probably doing what they claim in regard to support or weaponry, which is what everyone in the world does. But it's just wild to me that they can assassinate this man under the guise of peace talks, whatever you think he is. On top of that, the point is the Western world is supposed to be demanding evidence, a trial, that we're not like them, that just kill people with suicide attacks. Well, what's no different, guys? Then you go into the other part of the conversation where there was other people that were killed. One of them was the, I forgot I put those in there, was the Iranian president, former president. You know what that means? That means he was a civilian. That means they murdered a civilian because, he was formerly in the government. Think about that for a second, and we'll come back to it. Now, the Kamini account, the original, like not the secondary media accounts, but his actual account, he says on the 17th, the island of corruption is one example in regard to the Epstein Island. There is much more of this. Just as this was not apparent and then became exposed, there are many other things that will soon come to light. And then he was assassinated under the cover of peace talks by the Board of Peace. Just in case we're unclear about that, right? The reality that this man was killed after telling you. Now, who knows? Maybe that he was just suggesting that he saw that coming too. Or maybe there was more. Maybe there was another reason on top of every other reason they drove to take. Maybe this was what got Trump moving. In a historical situation, Israel's been trying to drive the U.S. government to doing this my entire life. And even Trump in the past has, done a lot, but waffled. And maybe this was the driving factor. They're going to expose your connections to Epstein. Let us do what we want. Just a thought. Now, here's what Trump had to say about this. Now, think about how crazy this is. Trump just assassinated this leader illegally in every possible sense, but even within that, just dishonestly, in a way that was manipulative under the guise of peace talks. So there is no legal justification for any of this, even if everything they say is true. And it's not, by the way. And then Ducey decides to throw him a softball, and who knows if it's even true, and says which probably is, because look at what they're doing. Imagine what Republicans would be saying right now if they had done the reverse and they had killed Trump, right? So he goes, they're saying they want to kill you. What are you going to do about that? So listen to what he had to say, and then we'll talk about how insane it is that he just said this after what just happened.
Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That'd be the end. I've left instructions.
Oh, interesting.
If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left.
Got that? So if they do exactly what Trump just did, Trump will nuke the country, or bomb them into obliteration, or whoever's left anyway.
And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why. Lack of intelligence, perhaps.
Right.
He never said it.
That makes sense.
If that happens to a leader or close to a leader, frankly, if you had other people involved also, you would call for total obliteration of a state that did it.
Oh,
That
would you?
include Iran.
Sorry for the video freaking out. Not sure why. Well, think about what he just said. Okay, so what you're saying is, and he said in a general sense, mind you, if that would happen, then that's what you would do. Did he not just literally say that Iran, in his logic, should be doing that? Is he that ridiculous, or is that actually what they're trying to drive to happen here? I mean, think about that. He just literally said that if they were to do the thing he just did, that he would then, or he's left instructions to annihilate the country. So right there, it clearly shows you that under even his logic, then they would be, that they have the legal right to respond in that way, even though they're screaming terrorism. Secondarily, what we're talking about here, think about what we're talking. So we're talking about an action, the Trump gets killed. That's hypothetical, right? So he's saying if Iran were to do that, so they take Trump out. And his standing order would be to take us immediately to World War III and just bomb everything. Sounds like Israel. Sounds like the Samson option. But the point is that good for Americans? Well, clearly that's not what he wants. He wants, avenge me, murder everybody because I am selfish, because I am a narcissist, and because it's about me and in my name. The first thing we should be considering is whether that's in the interest of Americans. If they killed him and that was the end of it, if you think about what is that, does that mean, like, it's the same thing in reverse. From Iranians' perspective, if this would actually be done, they might very well just try to walk this back. I doubt that's going to happen because clearly they have been pushed into a corner their entire life, it seems. And ultimately right now, it seems like they're fed up. And we're going to get to the point of them arguably denying the ceasefire that Trump put forward, which says quite a lot. But I just can't get past that. The idea that he would say that. And then, at the end of the day, I think they've even absorbed and don't even realize that they're doing it. The actual mindset that it's okay when we do it, not when they do it, because we're the good guys, right? Like that's what they feel like, obviously, right? Because we're not the bad guys. We can do those things. And that's literally been the U.S. government mindset my entire life. It's not illegal when the president does it, Nixon said. You know what I mean? Like, it's very clear that they have this mindset, and that's simply not the reality. So they killed the former Iranian president. And here is what Mehdi Hassan had to say. Trump murdered Mohammed, I'll probably mispronounce his last name, the former president of Iran, who, whatever you think of him, was a civilian, not in the military. And so it was murder, plain and simple. Now, let's even be clear on top of that, guys. If just because you're in the military does not mean that you're immediately a military target. If you're in your home with your family, you're not a military target. But Israel doesn't think that, clearly, even though that's the case. Or they know that, but just don't care is the right way to say that. But so it doesn't just, there are people being killed all over the place that are in the military that are actually still war crimes. But in this case, he was quite literally a civilian. And so it was murder. As illegal and as murderous as Iran bombing and killing, say, George W. Bush in his home in Dallas. But they would all use to rush us to war. Even though right now, based on the exact same thing in reverse, they're claiming Iran's actions in any way are terrorism. Just think about how stupid that is. Like, you could very least argue, well, they have the right to respond, but they're terrorists and we're still going to try to take them out. But they don't even do that. They act like we're that stupid, that their responses are unprecedented and unjustified. They're actually saying that. So Trump, in the same video, not going to play it, but we'll point you more in a later part. Trump says Iran's entire military command is gone. So who knows at this point? So far, at least the Kamini point seems like that's fleshed out, but they've lied about this stuff. Let's put it this way. It's policy in my mind that they lie about projecting absolute strength in the middle of warfare, even though we know it. And, the mindset being, if we can just trick a few people into thinking we're stronger than they are, then it gives them some kind of edge. They lie every single time. They lie about it every single time. But that's not the same as saying that it might also be true. My point is, whether they even know it, they would come out and say that. Think of it like this. Before they even get the information about what's happened, they rush to the microphone and give you what they want you to think. And then maybe it ends up being that, maybe something else. That's what they do. Now, on the point of Netanyahu fleeing, these are all points from yesterday that are up in the air. What's interesting is it has been shown that it's called the Wing of Zion, Israel's state aircraft, has flown to Germany and was parked, and they claim for safety in the Berlin airport. Now, the reports, or rather more specifically, the what's the right term for it? You know, the airline, like the maritime mapping, the airline GPS mapping showed that they went to Cyprus and got turned away, then went to Berlin. Now that shows me something. That shows me, and on top of that, we now have allegedly attacks from Iran hitting Cyprus. I want to say right now, before we even get into the bombing part of this, I think it's worth very much so. It behooves us to ask whether everything happening is in fact bombings from Iran. Like right now, I think there's obvious examples, and Iran made it clear. They stated that these are belligerents, and legally speaking, by every definition of the term, they are. They've allowed them to fuel. They've allowed them to bomb from their locations. So any of the countries that are involved with allowing what U.S. and Israel just did are legally belligerents, meaning they have the legal right to bomb them back. That's just the fact. But doesn't mean that, well, like, so some of them I think that I've already seen hit don't seem to line up for me like that. But maybe that wouldn't surprise me that Iran just did it because they're angry. But it's also possible that we have Israel or the U.S. creating chaos in other places so they can, mixed in with what's happening so they can go look at how crazy they are. Look, they just bombed that hospital over there. Look, they just did this, right? Question those things. As always, don't blindly assume. Iran is just as capable of doing evil like any other government in my mind. So my point in all this is that the flight seems to have gone. The question is whether or not Netanyahu fled. Now, like last time, he did, guys. That was shown. This person is a coward. He's fled in many examples where people are left there to defend what he created. But we can't prove that. Maybe it was just the plane. But why? So why, they just want to save the plane? Maybe, I guess. But I guess we'll find out as he goes forward. So that's where that's at this point. The plane seems to have been confirmed, but whether he was involved or on it, it's hard to know because he can still do videos. In fact, we'll get to one where he claims he's on top of a building in Tel Aviv, but we can get to that in a second. Strait of Hormuz. There's so much nonsense flying around. It's kind of crazy to me. And here's what's wild. This is not some only mainstream alternative media thing. What we're actually seeing is the true mechanism here. What the mainstream alternative media just does, here's a good kind of analogy, or rather comparison. Think about, like, so we're talking about the new media, the mainstream alternative versus the mainstream. Compare that to the current reality of the Trump administration, to just our U.S. government, and how they're all corrupt, right? They're all criminals, but there's a special kind of stupid and incompetence in what's currently going on in Trump's administration. And I think that's just where it's naturally declined to. In the same way, I think you can see the mainstream alternative media emulating the mainstream, but doing it in a clumsy, ridiculous, incompetent way. So it just becomes too obvious. Funny how that looks the same, doesn't it? So in this case, my point is that you got a lot of this reporting that was false, but it's not just them doing that in a clumsy way. You actually have the corporate media reporting things that are false, but that's not new to those of us that are paying attention. Oil price is expected to surge after Iran strikes and Strait of Hormuz closure. Now, it's not entirely, well, I think it's inaccurate to call it a closure at all, and I'll show you why. But this was reported yesterday, and it was provably not closed. It was stated, and yet this is still how it gets reported. It says the price of oil expected to soar on Monday as the U.S. Israel war on Iran an effective closure. Effective. See, that's not what it says in the title. So this is not closed, even by their own admission right now. And I'll show you what they mean. The effective closure, just really quickly, that's the effective closure right now. That's the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, we'll come back to that. The effective closure of a critical Strait of Hormuz rattles investors, despite major producers' pledges to increase their output. It says Iran's Revolutionary Guards reportedly told ships on Saturday that the passage through the Strait of Hormuz was prohibited. I haven't actually seen that. That wouldn't surprise me, though. I'm actually surprised they haven't done this in the past. It says, in effect, shutting the key choke point and prompting the halt of some oil shipments. It says the closure of the Strait of Hormuz would disrupt shipments from Saudi Arabia and the UAE, or Iraq, Kuwait, and as well from Iran, leading to shortages and higher energy prices and tons of other things we can include. Okay. Well, funny how that contradict, if and when it happens, sounds like sort of a different point. Well, okay. So here's the reality, guys. Based on what I can find out, based on my research on this, it seems as if Iran stood up and said, you're not allowed to come through the Strait of Hormuz. Like right when this first started. Didn't do anything, didn't necessarily shut it down. Look, let me show you again really quickly. Here are military ships. And what you're going to see is U.S. ships sitting right there inside, right? Like, so inside the cove here, like past Strait of Hormuz. There's one there. I thought there was another one, but there's one there. So my point being, that's not shut down. If everybody is, coming and going, and ultimately what you can see is that normal traffic is clearly represented in all this. That's right now. This is a live reality, but there's the time. So when they stood up and said, we're going to do that, it did have a response. And many people then said, well, we're not going to do that, or we're going to hold back on our shipments. So in effect, their statement did have a reduction of traffic, but you can clearly see that there's still traffic. So I think what we're dealing with is either one of two things, that this was their statement with the kind of meant to be sort of a, stating it has an effect, but like a threat too, right? So it's closed, but then people still come through. So that is in effect having some kind of a reverberation, but then it's more of this, the threat being, we will actually do this if you keep going. And even the statement has caused effect. You see my point in saying it like that is that they recognize that it's sort of like, we're already doing it to a degree, but we'll go further. Or as we should always consider that there's something bigger going on. There's a larger global illusion taking place, and Iran and everybody else is playing some kind of a game to manipulate prices or oil. I don't know, because I just don't get why it'd be done this way, but I don't have all the details. I don't know what's in their minds and what Trump has said behind the scenes. So it's always worth just being objective and waiting to see what happens. But the main point is it doesn't appear to be closed at all. And I mean, every mainstream alternative media person told you yesterday, absolutely 100% closed, because that's what was circling on Twitter, and they all just repeat each other. It's pretty embarrassing. But overall, I think this is going to have an effect, and they're going to use that point to argue Iran's doing this to the world. The last point on the top of that is I think that might be one reason they would hold back from doing it, because they know it'll be framed that they're, in effect, hurting more than just Israel and the United States. So an important point in all of this was the pre-planning. And that is interestingly now being sort of scrubbed and covered up. Bronco Marsetic here is the one that seems to have caught it. Oh, a writer for you. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I like that platform. But, objectively, there's plenty of things I could disagree with. But the point is, this scrubbed Reuters line is now partly backed up by an Axios report. Actually, I should have read this first. The line where the Israeli official says the date had been decided weeks ago, that we reported day before yesterday, I think, has been scrubbed. Why would they do that? Then he follows up and he says, and I'll show it to you, they scrubbed the Reuters line, but then Axios, referencing that before they scrubbed it, and I love how that works sometimes, is in fact still backing up the argument. So here is the original. And we showed you this in the last show. I forget somebody else caught it, and we were sharing their work on Twitter. I forget who it was off the top of my head, but it's cited in the last show. An Israeli defense official said to Reuters that the operation had been planned for months in coordination with Washington, and that the launch date was decided weeks ago. Now, that's important because of the way they say that. Not that we were planning potential dates for maybe situations, but that we had picked a date weeks ago. And right now, guys, to be very clear, pretty much everything we're seeing is backing up the fact that they knew this was going to happen. They planned it and then lied about it. Just like, and on top of everything else, historically, like I just said, we saw them do that with Lebanon. We saw them do that with Iran before. We've seen them do this many times. So it shouldn't even be shocking that they would be potentially doing that, meaning that they're faking peace talks in order to let them lower their guard. And then in some cases, you see them just respond later when they're just thinking nothing's coming, right? But this is even worse. This is a peace talk setup where they're coming to discuss it under the guise of diplomacy. So they come into the room that's never supposed to be broken, and they bomb them in the room that is supposed to be discussing it. That's just, I mean, there's nobody with any scruples, any principles, any integrity should act like that makes sense. Now, and okay, if your argument as always is, well, Ryan, they're evil monsters. Shouldn't you just take advantage? Okay, fine. You could make the argument, but then wouldn't you then argue that we are better than them, or that we're, have better moral guidance, so we would not fall to their level? Yes, always making that point. Doing the same thing makes you the same, guys. Everything else is just your equivocation, rationalization. Now, they deleted this. You can check the original article. It's gone. They just removed the line. So Axios, though, reported this. 2 months, 2 tracks. How Trump chose war with Iran. So too late. It's already been seen. Simple point. Over the following weeks, the Mossad director visited D.C. twice, followed by the Israeli military intelligence chief and the IDF chief of staff, all coordinating what would become Operations Epic Fury and Roaring Lion. So the bottom line is that it's very clearly outlined that they discussed this, they met, they planned it out. A week before the Geneva meetings, the U.S. and Israel agreed on a potential window for launching the attack. the coming Saturday when Kamini held a routine meeting with his top aides at his government compound. Based on the fact, again, that they were offering this deal, guys. That's the point. That's the only reason that exact thing happened, and this is what they do every time. So knowing that they were planning this, it's important to think about how this all went down, right? The lies that were put forward in the front of everybody, screaming, peace, president, and decensored news really did catch a good example here. This was on New Year's Eve, guys. 2 days after Trump met with Netanyahu in Mar-a-Lago, right? Well, we just saw what happened. We knew, and now we're here. This was, and let's also not be dishonest with ourselves. Netanyahu's been screaming about this his entire life. Also, as we'll get to, he just publicly said to the world, I promised you I would do this for 40 years. But we're being told he's reacting to bad. No, he's been pushing the U.S. to do this his entire life. So here is what, and also here's Trump saying something about peace. Here, another example to add before I play it is Melania. Arguably, the background conversation is that, that they're not really doing so well, and that she tends to, shuck him and, buck him here and there. So I think that is relevant to her reaction here, just to consider that she would be willing to react like this in front of other people. Or it could mean nothing. You can decide.
Mr. President, do you have a New Year's resolution?
I have.
Let's hear it.
Peace on earth. Peace on earth.
Let's hear it.
Peace on earth. Peace on earth. Peace on earth.
You can't miss that.
So, okay, the volume's low. He asked what his New Year's resolution was, and he said, peace on earth. And guys, you clearly see her eyes like shock. She turns at him shocked. Why? Because she probably knows they already planned not to do that. That's my opinion entirely. All that's reportable as fact is that she responded that way. You can decide. I just think it's relevant with what we're discussing.
Peace on earth.
I mean, wow, that's pretty crazy. Her eyes literally go big, like they, widen.
Peace on earth. Peace on earth. Peace on earth.
So, continuing. Here is what Trump was saying back in 2024. I opened it, but we'll play it again. I started with this. It's just, there's no way that you argue this somehow makes sense. Now, here's an important thing that I've been saying my entire career doing this. I never argued that it wouldn't, that, like if we're talking about knowing that this would happen, Iran war, whatever. And now, and Trump back here going, you're not going to have Iran war with us. Okay. I didn't say it wouldn't happen without justification. I didn't say that there wouldn't be a reason for it. I said that it's going to happen, right? And so now that it happens, and the people that were screaming it won't happen because Trump, their argument's like, well, but it's justified, Ryan. They did things have changed. The story's changed. Okay. Well, did we discuss that? No, we just simply said you said it wouldn't. I said it would. That's it. And so always what happens is they provide you these days with a very flimsy, but with a justification. So it's not about whether it was ever going to be justified. It's about whether it would or not, guys. And you know that. It's the peace president is not the peace president asterisk unless it's necessary. That's not how that works. It's just bad. It's embarrassing. That's why I use the classic Steve Carell, or was it Carell? Suddenly blanking on his name, but from The Office, that's cringy. Like, that's crazy. So now let's talk more cringy. Let's talk about what desperate flailing does not do it justice. The partisans out there who are making the rounds, might as well. You got Clay Travis here and the rest. He might as well be John McCain. How embarrassing that must be. Clay Travis, you guys are all acting like you're the rebels fighting the deep state. You literally are the people telling us that they're going to cheer us on after the Iraq invasion. How do you guys know? Here, you either don't recognize how that you're doing the same thing, or you've always been a part of the lie. He says, from Iran to Venezuela to Cuba. Oh, great. So more Cuba war coming soon, guys. But America first. We are witnessing a new birth of freedom under President Trump. In what discernible way? Look, you could try to argue that all of this will end up that way, but there's nothing but examples, and mostly conservatives are calling it out, of the opposite. More government, more spending, less control, ignoring the Constitution, all over the place. Freedom? And look, let's just even talk about the reality of what we're doing. Iran. What you're doing is chaos. You're working with a government that is openly committing genocide. And here they are going, hooray, freedom. He says the modern day collapse of the Berlin Wall. Guys, these people are making fun of you or they're just this stupid. And it says they just reload the same propaganda every time and the morons eat it up every time. The collapse of Saddam Hussein, oh, they're going to meet us as welcoming heroes. Never the case. Guys, I mean, can we not learn from our mistakes? Look at Iraq. Nobody wanted that other than the people that they paid to do that. And the screaming mobs that they got. Yes, they lied. And then we look back and we go, clearly, Iraqis hated that. We can't consider, I shouldn't even say that. I'm of the mind, most of us already are. I'm just trying to make it clear that people like Clay Travis and the rest of them are just, again, either blind or dishonest. And and speaking of blind and dishonest and stupid, here's James Woods. America's great again. This is as stupid as what's her name, McMahon saying, this is what peace through strength looks like. Well, it's not over yet. We're in the middle of the chaos war part of it. So how can you argue that peace is happening when you haven't even gotten to the end point yet? Because they know the talking points, guys. This is you're pointing at JD Vance and Rubio, Hegseth and Trump as if that's great people. Guys, this is embarrassing. This is straight up pandering, cheerleading BS, which is why I posted the Go Squad meme, because that's all they're doing. These are historically unpopular people within their own team because they're ridiculous. Rubio hated Trump. Vance hated Trump. Hegseth will do anything he's told. It's just lazy, but they're supposed to do it. America's great again. And then on top of that, why is it great again right now? Why? What happened? Was it great to start? Was Stargate and all the those are great things, or did it just suddenly become great because he bombed a foreign country illegally? These people are showing you what they are. They're either really just bad, like the people that will cheer illegal actions and murder and chaos, or they just don't care because team sport politics. Remember when James Woods used to be like funny and edgy and the outside? No, he is literally a mainstream team player at this point. Katie Miller comes out and says, too soon? And literally posts a Greenland map that's an American flag. Why would you even post that right now? Why? Because the indication is we're going full authoritarian colonial conquering. That's what they're talking about. They've already been making that clear, but to post this right now in the midst of what's happening with Iran, you're simply going, do that next, because that's what Israel wants. Katie Miller, Stephen Miller, Israel, that's what they're doing. That's what they want. Sad. Here is Lindsey Graham saying, Arab world will join us. They'll welcome us as liberating heroes. I mean, they just recycle the same things, guys. I think the Arabs are going to join the fight. Well, yeah, they're going to fight you. That's objectively clear right now. I think you're going to see a coalition between the United States and the Arab world. Now, what they mean is all of the puppet regimes they put in place in the governments of the Arab world who are broadly disliked. Look at Egypt. Guys, you can check these things for yourself. Frankly, I think the world is changing in that direction, but they're wildly unpopular, the governments. The reason I say that is because our government's wildly unpopular. Most governments, I think, because people are changing their minds. But in these, more than usual, they overthrew Egypt and put Sisi in place. Where's my favorite dictator? Trump famously says, because they put him there. And they hate Israel, but Sisi was trying to make deals with it because they're not working for the people, guys. The fact that we're going to work together potentially with the Arabs to liberate the Iranian people is unbelievable. This person is such a disgusting, and nobody likes this guy. Even Republicans hate this guy, but Israel loves him, so he stays in power. You know how that works. Here's Ted Cruz. Here's Mamdani, by the way, who says today's military strikes in Iran carried out by the United States and Israel mark a catastrophic escalation in an illegal war of aggression. Bombing cities, killing civilians, all of which very clearly happened, opening a new theater of war. Americans do not want this, which is so shockingly clear and more so today than ever for Republicans. They do not want another war in pursuit of regime change. And that's why it's so embarrassing to watch the Alex Jones and Nick Sorters and they waffle, but they're supporting it. More so the one like the Knicks types are out there going, yay, I'm so proud of my country. But the Joneses are trying to very uncomfortably walk a line right now where they go, I know Trump's doing the best he can, and I think he's doing the right thing. But then out there criticizing the objective. Find some path, man. Call it out or don't. The lazy middle ground argument is just you're exposing what you're really doing. The reality of what Trump is doing, fine, you can give him the benefit of the doubt if you think he's being blackmailed, but how does that describe or remove all of the other things we're talking about? He's an active player in this manipulation, and we all see that by now. But the point is, Mamdani was calling it out. I don't support him. I think he's part of the manipulation, quite frankly, in a lot of easy ways to point out. But here's what's interesting. Ted Cruz says, you're a communist who hates America. I said, oh, that's interesting. Well, then why did Trump just support him?
Say there's no difference in party, there's no difference in anything, and we're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and very safe New York. And congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, how weird. So is Trump a communist then? Is that how that works? Or is it only bad when they say things you don't like? Or, you know, he literally called him MAGA in that meeting. I showed you this discussion. He's basically MAGA. They literally told you after the entire right telling you this guy was like the most alarmingly evil communist monster and that we have to fight him because the Democrats are taking over. And then Trump says he's great. The Clintons are good people, you know. It never ceases to amaze me, the willing blindness of the partisan sides. So Cruz is just doing that because the game right now is to support Iran or the bombing of Iran. So you have to you either recognize that it's all nonsense and that they're all, or I mean, I just don't know why people continue to take part in how the what's the word I'm looking for? Like that it's this clear that they have nothing they actually believe in and people just continue to flock to it. But that is diminishing, as I think we're always pointing out. Kennedy Girl says, I don't give two SHITs if you love or hate Trump. When the U.S. is engaged in military battles, you set politics aside and get behind the damn American flag. Oh, is that what you do? God, people are so stupid today. All in for America. That's it. You can't do that, Massey. Just shut the F up. That's what she's saying. And, you know, it's insane to me how many of these people who are just giving you the most bootlicking, blindly stupid arguments are the ones that get all the attention. Or people right now who just blatantly lie to you will come out and just make, you know, North Korea said they're going to give them bombs. Nope, literally didn't happen. But that's got 1 million views and Elon shared it. And it's also got like 300,000 followers in that account. But, you know, that's this platform quite literally benefits people who spin BS all day long. But so she's just saying that apparently you should ignore what you care about and your integrity and your principles because you're an American. So you're supposed to blindly follow the team. That's actually what she's saying. And what Heinback Flick says, that's what Hitler would have said, right? That an authoritarian is going to say you have to support the team. Well, let's just even say, let's just say hypothetically that Trump was actually doing everything that you think he's not, Republicans. Let's just even say he was Hitler. Not saying he is. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that Trump was out there doing every possible bad thing you don't want. Kind of where we are, but hypothetically. So would it then be okay to go, well, I don't agree? How about Kentucky girl here? Kentucky girl. If Trump was out there and he just bombed your home, killed your entire family, was literally invading your hometown and was locking everybody up in cages, will you still go, too bad, I'd support the team because that's what Americans do? Would you do that? Or would you go, well, he's doing bad things, so I'm no longer going to support him? Well, if we can acknowledge, then you'd probably go, yes, I'm going to fight him in that. Then you can take a step back and go, well, other people have opinions too. And I may not agree with those opinions, but they can make their own opinions about whether or not that line has been crossed. That's called being an adult, Kentucky girl. You might want to figure that out, that recognizing that other people might disagree and they have a right to say, I don't stand with that we used to call an American value. It's just mindless. And on top of that, we have the person, Theodore Roosevelt, who historically said, I'll just bring it up since that one word will bring it up here. I always bring this up, not because I support him or anything else, but because it's a logical statement. He says to announce that there must be no criticism of the president or that we are to stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American people. Let that sink in for what she's saying. Morally treasonable to the American people. And this is what she's saying. I think I've got an image right here somewhere. Maybe not. In the past, I've downloaded the, oh, there it is. Just the image, just the, to make the points, people could read it, because that's what they're doing. Now here is Kamala Harris, one of the most hated people in politics. I agree. Donald Trump is dragging the United States into a war with the American people do not want. Oh, you mean like Israel and Gaza, like you were involved in, or every other war you've always supported? These people are ridiculous. They'll always take the moment to gain some political points, even though they agree. Like, Jill Stein. Or no, excuse me, Elizabeth Warren is what it was, not Jill Stein. Elizabeth Warren came out online and said, bad Iran war, and then clapped for Donald Trump. But she says, let me be clear, I'm opposed to the regime change war in Iran. Oh, unless she was in power. Then she'd be giving you reasons why it needs to happen. And our troops are being put in harm's way for sake of Trump's war of choice. Well, that's not incorrect, but I would argue she'd be doing the same thing. Carl says, you idiots unfroze $16 billion to Iran, which was their money. If you care to look it up, it's actually very easy to verify. They simply froze their resources and then eventually gave them back. They can't even be honest about that. You can still make the argument and say, well, they shouldn't get it because they're terrorists, but they can't even be honest about the fact that it was something they stole from them. But on top of that, and he says they used it to make nukes. No, they didn't, bud. Did not. And the evidence does not back that up. You can make the argument, maybe it's true somewhere that we don't see. The evidence doesn't back it up. It's so frustrating how continually these people, this is Newsmax, that might make it make sense for you. But here, I mean, look, Tulsi Gabbard, again, literally told you in March of 2025, they are not seeking a nuclear weapon. The International Atomic Energy Agency said that in 2024, 2025. They'll probably say it again when they get the opportunity because they go in there and they check this, and their job as the international entity is to tell you that. They could be lying, of course, but they've historically been very amenable to Israel's agenda. Until Amano was in there, who was the Japanese fellow that was in the leadership of that group until he was killed. Excuse me, he died mysteriously from some rapid cancer that he argued somebody was trying to kill him. But, and of course, he was also calling out Israel and their lies, and they were threatening him. And, but that totally doesn't line up. Here is a point to be made. I'm attacking Iran because they have nuclear weapons. It's a meme. It's not even worth getting into for the podcast, but it says the response, why don't you attack Russia? Are you crazy? They have nuclear weapons. Okay, so the point obviously being within the joke, if the argument is that it's dangerous for Russia, why would it be different for Iran? Because they know they don't have nuclear weapons. Isn't it funny how that works out? And the same thing with North Korea. Well, we're going to take you out if you get nuclear weapons. And the second they actually claim they have them, that stops being a point. So if you have any consistency in your logic or your, critical thinking, you would go, okay, then it only seems consistent that they do that to groups that don't have them. And then you start to understand the reality where they want you to think they do, and they use it to rationalize their choice, but they know they don't, so they continue to do it, knowing there's no risk of nuclear weapons being used against them, by Iran anyway. On top of that, this is a different one. I wrote this so I wouldn't forget. Oh, yeah, just simply the point being that another kind of analogy, or rather, statement to be made within that kind of logic is that we're talking about them saying we're going to bomb Iran because they have dangerous weapons, right? They have nukes and dangerous things, or at least they're getting really close. Okay. Then now after it's happened, and this happens every time, you get the same politicians and the same media entities that come out and go, they're so weak. They know they can't beat us. And they don't know. That's why they're not doing the things we said they would do before, because they can't even do it. Well, that completely contradicts what you said to start of why we need to do this. But you already know why that's happening, guys, because these are dishonest people who are driving you to war for a foreign country. Now, here's what even Grok had to say. All info taken into account. And as always, guys, Grok is a coin flip. It will be wrong. It'll lie to you. It'll be manipulated by Elon Musk. But I still find it interesting that it will show you an answer that most of the Republican people who point to these things and use Twitter will tell you they're wrong. And you don't need Grok to tell you that. And it's not true because Grok says it. It's true because you can verify it 1,000 other ways. Does Iran have nuclear weapons? All info taken into account. Does it have nukes? And are they seeking to make them? And no, based on their assessment, no, Iran does not have nukes. And realize when you're asking this, it's taken into account Israel's claims and their evidence, it's taken into U.S. claims and their evidence, it's taken into International Atomic Energy Agency, all of it. Are they seeking to make them? Prevailing consensus from Western intelligence and the International Atomic Energy Agency is that they are not actively pursuing. Okay, so what are we talking about here, guys? Even their platform will tell you that's not the case. So what are we dealing with here? If everyone knows that, then what are we talking about? We're talking about a country that has been taken over, guys. I'm tired of, I'm not like I've been mincing words about that for a while. And to be very clear, I've never minced words about that. My understanding of the situation has evolved over the years to the point, when I was at a point where I recognized Israel was influencing policy, you can go back a decade, I was outright saying that. And it's only become more and more clear to this day. Now, I'll be clear on top of that, there's people that have been saying it a decade more than me. No way suggesting I was the first one, but it's obvious out there. And the lies just never stop. And back to the point about the platform, here is a GPX account. I've never even heard it before, but it's got almost 170,000 followers. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said, if Iran wants, we can give them missiles against Israel. One will do. And didn't happen. Best as I can tell, didn't even happen. Now, again, these things can turn out later, and maybe tomorrow, Grok is whatever. This is just their fact-checking community note. But you can read the articles, and I don't believe that actually happened. But the point is, it just never stops. These accounts, like check this account a week from now. It'll probably have 250,000 followers. It just grows and grows because it is being insulated, it's being collected, it's being used by whatever this platform is made to do. All the people that continually get caught lying, every single story we cover continue to grow in influence on this platform, which let's be clear, that's no different than before. It's just the same problem in a little different way. I argue it's the same problem, just getting worse and worse and worse. Now, Matt Walsh, to talk about some of the partisan absurdities here, responds to George Conway saying, perhaps, and this is an excellent point, and not like it's new, but perhaps the terrorist state with a nuclear weapon is, checks notes, the United States of America. Okay, well, yes, guys, they absolutely have nuclear weapons, and they have been the ones using the threat of that warfare against everybody and sanctions and invasion. And I mean, ever since I've been alive, and way before that too. So he responds to that very obviously logical point to perhaps you are, checks notes, retarded. Okay. Well, that's embarrassing. And I said, that's what you got, Matt? Really? I can only imagine the snide retort that you would cook up should someone dare to respond to such a clearly valid and legitimate point with lazy and revealing name calling. Try addressing the point. But therein lies the issue. He has one. He clearly has a point, but that's what this is just gaslighting. That's embarrassing, man. That what this shows to me, because I don't think Matt Walsh is a stupid person. I find it to be pretty insightful and intelligent in ways where he chooses to show you that. And he is being manipulative right here. That's dishonesty. That's my opinion. So here is another response to this. Now, first, this was a day ago or so, and the argument is sort of like, all of them are rationalizing and pushing back on people who genuinely recognize the problem here. But here, today, suddenly, he has a response, or rather a statement that is, what are we going to do next? Well, gee, Matt, maybe we should have thought of that before we bull rushed into supporting an Iran war. And he says, what exactly is the end game? Quote, the Iranian people rise up and take control of their government. Okay, what does that even mean exactly? Which people? How are they taking control? What happens after they do take control? And these are valid points to make, right? Are we sure the new people, whoever they are, will be better than the old people? How are we going to make sure of that? How are we going to make sure of it while also not putting boots on the ground? This had not been explained. It needs to be. Who's we, Matt? Are we talking about we, the Iranian people, and their democratic process we all pretend that you guys are fighting for? Or are we, the U.S. government, deciding for them regardless of what they want? But democracy. I mean, that's just stupid. On top of the fact, what you're saying is basically rationalizing why boots on the ground need to happen. Anybody even surprised? And now Bricksuit says, endgame is any Iranian government that doesn't continue the current government's practice of attempting to build nuclear. Not happening. They're all lost in their own BS cycles, guys. Now, or funding terrorism through proxies. Are you talking about Israel here? Both those meet Israel. No, not them. So what they're saying is what the only endgame that we want for Iranian democracy is whatever the U.S. government wants, or rather whatever the MAGA team says we should want. How can you even in the same conversation pretend you want democracy or their leader, what the Iranian people want? That's what they're all cheering for. And then have conversations like this where it's only what works for us and whether we like who's in charge. Well, think of Venezuela, think about Bolivia, think about everywhere they're doing this because they don't care about what people in the countries want. Are we even actually still having that conversation with all the evidence we have? But this is what people like Matt do. He says, and why do we think that they'll end up with that kind of government? Meaning one that's not what they don't want. What happens when they don't do that? Go to war again? You see the point? And then again, just keep bombing them until the right people magically end up in charge? Lay it out for me. So what he's really doing is acting like he's criticizing, but what he's doing is justifying why they just have to take control and put who they want in there and make sure it stays that way. That's what he's literally doing right there. Now, what's funny is somebody rightly points out, which is what drew my attention to it, maybe Trump's buddy should do that. Should be there. This is what we're talking about. You think Matt Walsh isn't aware of the Syrian al-Qaeda Hayat al-Sham monster who they literally put in power in Syria? And in this video, Trump says, I essentially put him there and he's doing a great job. A guy who was behind killing of U.S. troops, systematic kidnappings, rape, forced marriages. The government had a $10 million bounty on his head. And now we're going to quibble about the right people being in charge? Have you made that comment about Syria, Matt? Oh, maybe he has. But all of that aside, how then can we argue that why are we supporting any of this? If this was the conversation that they never mapped out for you, why were you guys going, yes, let's do this, supporting what Trump wants to do? I think you know exactly why. Ben Shapiro has a very clear, the reality of, now Matt has pushed back on him plenty of times, but the reality of the big picture, I think, is quite obvious. This is what Israel wants, so that's what they want. I'm not even suggesting that's a conscious thing that they do that they know of. It might well be, but that's what this happens to be every time I look at it. And I just have to really stress again, why do you or anybody other than the Iranian people have the right to decide what their government should be? You see how this works, where they just deem themselves the deciders for the world because they're the most moral? No, they're not. They're the worst people. They're objectively some of the worst people on the planet. And I'm talking about the governments here. So why would they get to decide? Because what they ultimately do is, well, like Hamas can't be there because they're bad guys. So we want democracy, but it has to be the ones we like in that. So it's not democracy. And then even on top of that, they pick somebody who's not Hamas and you just still don't like them. You'll just say, no, we want somebody else. So ultimately you want what you want and you call it democracy. And in every other case, we point to the people that you wanted and they're all terrible people. To a T, guys. These people like this need to start being called out for lack of integrity, lack of consistency, whatever it is. Here's Anna Paulina Luna. How Iran was before Sharia law, communism took over in 1979. Sharia law? Come on, guys. Like, these people don't even understand what they're talking about, first of all. But the big point to be made is, you already know. 1979 was the Iranian Revolution after Operation Ajax, which was the U.S. and Israel overthrowing the country. Now, what they always love to do, and this is the video they're talking about, is go look at how wonderful it is. Look, it looks like the West. What you'll see, the women and the people in there. Here, just jump ahead. Yeah, because the crown prince of democracy totally makes sense, right? Look at them all in their jeans and their short skirts. Well, guess what, guys? There's people in Iran and women in Iran right now that look like that. It's not hard to, if you care to look. And it's funny how often people that want to go, that's not true, never even take the time to look. There's tons of media and people in Iran. There's women that do videos like this walking down the streets. Now, just like in other places, there are areas where they have their religious mandates that are enforced, just like in Israel, by the way. Like plenty of Israeli Orthodox women are forced to wear head coverings, just like in Iran, by the way, in those certain locations. But it is not broadly mandated for everybody in Iran. It's just not, despite their current laws being stated. You have to be able to prove these things for yourself. On top of all of that, to understand, as Robert's covered historically, and in fact, this next thing will say this for us, that the reaction to a lot of this was because of what they did to the country. And they saw the going back to the more traditional mindset as a pushing back on the Western cultures. Now, I would argue that plenty of those religious, more extremist people would then take advantage of that. I don't support any of these governments. But the reality is always and has been what the people of Iran want and what they then drive them to do because of their response, because of their illegitimate actions as the U.S. government. But so what they want to say is, oh my God, look at how they look Western and great and everything. Well, that's a lie. Because what we're pointing to here is the oligarch, elitist inner circle of the Shah. Not everybody else in Iran. They despised most of them because they did not want them there. And it's easy to prove. In fact, I'll do it in a second. But also recognize that before that, it was not what they claimed it was. Mossadegh was the person that they removed from power. As I said just yesterday, he was very, very much enamored with Western culture. It was written about. He has pictures next to the Liberty Bell. It's what he wanted. It's what he's talked about. They didn't like him because he was not willing to bow to whatever they wanted at the expense of Iranians. So they got him out of the way and put someone in power that was willing to do whatever they wanted at the expense of Iranians every single day. And people like this, who are either too dumb to know that or don't care, were willing to lie to you about it. And here is what Grok had to say. And I simply said, was the video that she depicted, and this is interesting that even Grok would say this, and you could look up on Wikipedia, for crying out loud. It'll sell you this. Is the video they depicted the reality for the majority of Iranians? And before 1979, because her argument is after that is when it became the Muslim chaos, right? It's not true. It says this was not the reality for the majority of Iranians. Very important. Economic inequality. But benefits were uneven, concentrated in urban elites. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Social and political repression. Suppressing dissent, sounds familiar. Torturing opponents, sounds familiar. Limiting political freedoms. secret police. And this is interesting, guys. The SAVAK, the secret police, that was under the Shah. And that is and these people were trained by Israel. That's all on the record. This is all, the consistency is so shocking everywhere in the world. Development indicators, their life expectancy dropped about 55 to 60 years. And it says the revolution in 1979 had broad support, partly because many resented the Shah's perceived elitism. Guys, it's just so crazy. Western puppet status, which they were unhappy about. So I broke there. It says they broadly supported this happening, the return to Iranian rule, because they resented the Shah and his perceived elitism, the Western puppet status because of his CIA-backed coup, inequality he created, and cultural alienation. Despite real progress in modernization and economic for parts of society, is what Brock continues to say. The point is, yes, they did do those things, guys, but it was in a select area for select people. Think apartheid in Israel, South Africa. It's what they do. But they seem to not care because, in fact, what I think is all of these inner circle people want that. They want the world where they're treated like kings and everybody else suffers. Can we not see that in the world everywhere these people are operating? And I'm not even suggesting that there's anybody else that doesn't want that. We should hope for that. We should leave the opportunity open for somebody who seems to suggest a group that tries to fight for that, even if they might. My point is that we should hope for that. But I don't think any government's demonstrated that, not truly. And I think that's why my point has always been that government seems to be the larger problem. But again, I digress. We're not even close to there yet, but we're getting there. Here's Naomi Wolf. She comes out and says, I'm not supporting war, in quotes, whatever that means. In this case of Iran, regime change is necessary, just as it was with Germany post-World War II. See, even that, by the way, fails to take into consideration the reality of the picture of what that was, the reality of the Rothschilds' involvement or the U.S. government behind the scenes working with the groups in Germany, or the end point where they absorbed all the worst parts of both Japan and Germany, Operation Paperclip, and the reality of how that went forward. The reality, though, is that this was all something that was manipulated from all sides, and that the eugenics programs being put forward by Germany, in fact, began in the United States. But all that aside, the idea that it was justified to regime change in any sense today, regardless of what you think about World War II, is ridiculous. It's not the case because it's built on verifiable lies, first of all. But secondarily, why is it their right to be able to just decide who gets removed? Like, you could have argued at a different point in time that that's just how the world worked. Today, it maybe still works that way. And I think that's the reality that we don't want to be the case, but they at least pretend that we live in a different world of modern society, right? Where there's international law. Don't Trump and everybody else continue to pretend like that's what they get guided by? So under international law, they're not allowed to just go, you're out of power because I don't like you or because you're a criminal. There's supposed to be a legal international process. You don't think Naomi Wolf knows that? Or is the argument because this is so important, we should ignore the law, but just us, though? Now it says the United States has a right to defend itself. Come on, man. Right there, it's embarrassing to me. Okay, first of all, so does everybody else. Can we just stop saying that? That's a token propaganda point. From serious national security threats. Oh, so we're just supposed to blindly assume that a government that's lied to us about Iran our entire lives suddenly is honest about a preemptive attack for national security that we can't divulge? Come on, guys, we're not this naive. And as a woman, I do not think that anyone serious can be an apologist for a regime that enslaves half the population. That's not what's happening. You can disagree with me, but at least take the time to try to look through, because what you're going to get is State Department, Israel media, MEMRI, which she shares all the time, which is literally run by Israeli intelligence. On the record, by the way. Also importantly, I'm reading United in Hate, the left's romance with tyranny, because lefties are terrorists, guys. I'm just tired of people that present themselves another way. And as Derek says, yes, you are just repeating state talking points and falling for the latest empire expansion. Now, I think I might have it right here. Yeah, she responded saying, not to me, by the way, in other cases where I made similar points. Funny how that works out. But I said, she says, will you debate live? If so, contact me. And he responded saying, yes, I will. So we'll see if that actually happens. Frankly, if you read the comments, it seems pretty clear that everyone's like this. I argue it'd be worth it. I think it's important to show some of this stuff. But I think at the end of the day, most of the comments are like, why even waste the time? Like, I think people are just starting to see that there's a one-sided argument coming from very specific people. Now here she is retweeting Elon Levy, by the way, one of the most objectively dishonest people in the entire conversation around Israel, who got fired from a propaganda position because he was that obvious about it. Or that's my opinion about it, but he got fired from a position working for Israel to propagandize everybody because he, in my opinion, he continued to get caught lying. And he says, retreat if you want, if you want to visit a free Iran. You mean like you can right now? You can fly in there right now. I know friends that backpack through there who wandered freely. And his name's Brian, by the way. I interviewed him when he came back. He's not attached to any kind of group. He's just a guy who went to travel. You can do that right now, but they want you to think that's not the case. Just like they want you to think that every Middle East country that you want to fight is all barbarians in caves. Iran is very technologically advanced. And she says, I can't wait. As an American Jew. And I said, you see, everyone, consistency. It's all about consistency. Call out the hypocrites, right? I mean, the idea that there's a lack of consistency in the argument here. If you're going to defend, like you could make these points about any other, Russia, Ukraine, other points where people have made different arguments. Iran and Israel always seem to expose the pretenders. And here she is sharing Bridget Gabriel, one of the, I mean, God, this woman is ridiculous, and sharing MEMRI. And she says, and the point was, where are all the feminists? And she's literally again arguing, Sharia is spreading in the United States and leftists remain silent. No, it's not. And she says, right here. And the only work done on Islamist abuse of women has been by feminists. Now, I'm not claiming there's not abuse of women. It happens all over the world. I don't agree with it. She says, where is anyone else who is supposed to care about women? This approach is so wrong. The whole thing is they're sharing a clip from a platform that's created and run and operated by Israeli intelligence. That's a fact. You can look it up on Wikipedia. And the reality being that, one, they often and have been caught, even on Wikipedia will say this, using assets to present these things and framing them as representative of Muslims. But on another point, guys, there are radical Muslims, just like there are radical Jews and radical Christians. And they can find those clips and find those people and go, look at how all Muslims are. If an American comes out and says, I want to kill every Jew, does that mean every American thinks that? Why would anybody believe something stupid like that? But that's what they do right here. This guy says things, therefore every Muslim. We have to see people that do that. And I said MEMRI was founded and is currently run by Israeli intelligence. Easily verifiable. The platform has been repeatedly caught lying, but I'd like to think you already know that. The idea that Sharia is spreading in the United States is an embarrassingly false claim. And if you want to look into it, you can ask Grok, you can look up news reports. It's not true. There's no single verifiable example of anything. Even a proposed legislation that says initiating Sharia law. In fact, on top of it, it would be unconstitutional, wouldn't it? Not that they even care about that in the government, but people do. But you can watch the video. I go through it very carefully, showing Laura Loomer sharing it and how, the evidence going back to source material, written articles, corporate media, Wikipedia, all telling you, literally run by current Israeli intelligence. But that doesn't matter, apparently. And here's J.K. Rowling saying, if you claim to support human rights yet can't bring yourself to show solidarity for those fighting for their liberty in Iran, you've revealed yourself. Now, my gut would tell me this is somebody falling for what they think is the reality, but who knows? My point is that why do you think you know what's going on in regard to, other than what we can generally prove, which is what I'm operating on? As I'm going to show you in a second, there's people in Iran that do want this to be happening, as I've always told you. But it seems pretty clear, based on everything we can see, that the majority of people are not in support of what this is, historically, as far back as you want to look. And so that being said, the only place you're getting this from are places like the State Department, like the kind of media that are pushing out the ideas. This is all what, and this is my point. If I can show you yesterday, which I did, whether it's using Grok or anything else that says, look, this is a false depiction, saying, look at all the protests. And turns out all of them were actually protests in support of Iran against their actions. And people lied about it. So if you have to constantly lie about those things, it's pretty clear that that's not the accurate depiction. Right? I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But it says you don't give a damn about people being oppressed and brutalized. Well, we do, though, because it's obvious it's happening other places. Let's just take it personally. I'm talking about Israel. I'm talking about Venezuela. I just think you're incorrect about Iran. And the reality is that we see them lying. Aren't you the one calling out the lies of the government and other examples? But Brian here, Bearletic, says, read the U.S.'s own policy papers, which Path to Persia, which we've talked about so many times in this platform, is all about the U.S. starving Iran to death, funding the army, arming terrorists to destroy it from the inside, making fake deals to frame Iran as the bad guys, and duping the public into accepting related U.S. Israel strikes on it from abroad. Literally, guys, that is this document. We've talked about this so many times. 2009, which path to Persia? That's like Patrick Clausen saying, how do we get to war with Iran? They're gaming how to make this happen. And if you want to get into it in depth, watch our previous shows. I'll include, I linked to it in one of these tweets, the discussion of that. And let me just see if I can grab it here. So you have there it is, the article instead of just the link within the tweet. This was written by Brandon Turbeville, 2018. The path to Persia and the ongoing plot to destroy Iran. It's worth truly understanding this, guys. Here, I might as well just share this out too. I forget if I did earlier, but it's worth it. Because this has been a long-sought plan, guys, a long-sought plan. So here, he continues, they admitted all throughout the document that they need to lie to the public to build consent for regime change. So these are obvious realities that they manipulate what we understand. They lie about what's happening. They create false flags. They kill civilians and blame it on the country. That's not the same as saying Iran's not capable of doing it themselves. Both can be real. Both can exist. But as an American, it's important that I make sure you understand that the U.S. government's been caught shooting civilians and blaming it on Syria, blaming it on Russia, blaming it on any number of examples. That's not to say that those groups aren't capable of that. So, that's right. I forgot this, just to point this out. I thought this is the kind of thing that frustrates me about this, is that people come out and basically make the argument trying to downplay. Right now, I don't see very many people making the nonpartisan argument other than the groups that we associate with. Most of the mainstream alternative media is, either as usual, one diametric, opposite side of the other. But it says basically that I never talk about which path to Persia. And because I don't, that makes me an Israel Hasbara agent, aside from the fact that I do. Now, what I think this is somebody who is trying to muddy the waters about the work we're doing. So people then get scared away who otherwise think, who are rightly on guard for what's going on. I think this happens all the time. And this is an important one, by the way. This is something that somebody commented. Now, the name is included down there because it's publicly posted on my website, but the email is removed. And I thought this was very important to share because I've said this many times over the years, it's not all one thing or the other. Robert's made this point as well. So this person wrote to me, and the reason I'm sharing this is my gut, I could be wrong. My gut tells me that this was a genuine comment, that he meant what he said. So take it as that for the sake of the point. He says, "Hi, Mr. Cristian. I'm an Iranian listener since 2020. First, I would like to thank you for your unbiased and informative reporting during COVID. You saved my family and I. However, you are incorrect about the Iranian situation. Iranians are rejoicing the fall of this abusive theocratic regime, which has appeased the Iranian, oppressed is what he meant to say, oppressed the Iranian regime since 1979. Or oppressed the Iranian people since 1979. In Iran, as an Iranian, he says, I can assure you, your take on Iran and its government is incorrect. He says, please reconsider your sources. Perhaps Robert Imlakesh is not the best source for real info for Iran. I disagree. And Iran are in these where that's topics are concerned. Although it says, I'm not a supporter of the current attack on my former country. I know firsthand the majority of Iranians, including my own friends and family here in Iran and past parts of Europe, are all happy with current occurring, are not happy. I feel sad for all the innocent lives. Are all happy. Wait, let me read that again. It says, I'm not a supporter of the current attack on my former country. I'm not. I know firsthand that the majority of Iranians, including, so he is saying that I'm not a supporter of the attack, but he's saying I know firsthand that he's claiming that the majority of Iranians, including his friends, are happy with the current occurring, which is my point from before. Whether it's school children being bombed or just bombing the country and killing Iranians, that's the equivalent of Republicans going, I know that they just bombed our own people, but it's okay because we're getting what we want. I don't think that's what honest people are thinking. You see what I'm saying? That is what people who have an agenda are thinking. It's okay to sacrifice them. Like Trump is saying, more Americans are going to die. But it says, I feel sad for all the innocent lives lost. And it says, again, thank you for all you do for humanity. You're an amazing soul. May you God protect you in these crazy times. Here's how I responded. I said, thank you for your support and your honest opinion. However, I have far more Iranians, both living and in Iran and elsewhere, telling me the opposite. Now, that in no way means that's the reality. That's just my insight into what people that I've come across over the years and who I talk to. And it says, I believe to some degree that both are true. All I can do is report what I can prove and give you my thoughts. Either way, what the government, the U.S. government is doing is illegal, regardless of what he thinks. That matters to me. I appreciate you giving me your thoughts, and I will take them to heart. So I want you to think about that, right? The point that there are, and I guarantee it, there are Iranians that are in Iran that I'm not going to say support killing Iranians and bombing children, but support the overthrow of the current government, even to the point where they would support Israel and the U.S. taking action. But the idea that we'd be standing on the dead bodies of Iranians, not speaking about this person, because it seems like he's not even in Iran. He's talking about his friends and family that are still there, that they're standing in a place where you just watch civilian, because I'm going to get to the point where there are civilian locations being bombed. Objectively, you can see it. It's obviously happening. And so the point being that would be something I would think Iranians would be unhappy with. Like, even to the point where they go, well, I still want the government gone, but I don't agree with the way this is happening. Like, that I could take, but that's not what you're getting mostly online. But I want you to think about the fact that there are people that do support that. But I think it's clear, based on what I'm saying and all the rest of the factors, that the majority, in my opinion, of Iranians do not feel that way, even though there are some that do. But please seek out the information and come to your conclusions on it. On top of that, this could very well be a kind of what they call it, an Oreo, or what do they call it? Like basically where you start with a positive, you give them the negative, and you just end with a positive. Or yeah, so you kind of you bunch it with two net positives, so people are more open to hearing the negative. Or it could be a lie in the first place. Always possible. But again, like I said, my gut was that this was a real comment, and they just wanted me to know that they think that that's incorrect. But we can eventually, the facts will flesh out to some degree, and we will find out, I think. I think right now, if you're looking at the facts objectively, it's a very clear picture, but it's not completely definitive, like in most cases. But here's DD Geopolitics, one of many examples, and you'll find examples out there, far fewer than you may think, by the way, of claims of massive protesting. And most everyone that I check is either from old or some example, like I just showed you, of all 6 of them going all around the world. All of them, I showed you the last show or the one before, are a protest actually chanting against it. Now, it says, we will fight, we will die, we will not compromise. Chants in the streets of Tehran. Now, what's frustrating, by the way, what they're saying is these are people that are basically protesting against the action. But what's funny is when you post this on Twitter, it only gives you the Shah flag, which I find interesting. Now, Sputnik, protests resume in Baghdad's green zone amid Iran escalations. Now, there are protests in other places as well against U.S. occupation. And I think that's important to think about. In Iraq, in other places in the world, people are rushing the embassies. And of course, the people online make that out to be some kind of Arabs are monsters or whatever. But at the end of the day, the world is standing up. What they're doing is illegal. Most of these bases are not wanted by pretty much all the countries they're in. It's about strong arming and forced and their launch pads and what they're using it for. And now you're seeing people that are starting to make that clear. Now, that could still be the majority, that could still be the minority who can tell. But it's worth pointing out that there are groups that are taking the time to stand up and protest in the midst of what's happening, knowing they'll probably be shot at. It's worth considering. Here's another example. Clashes between protesters and police have broken out at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Now, on the bombing side of this, guys, I thought this was a good visual for the point. As Primo Radical says, don't blame me, I voted for kudos. He says, which U.S. president illegally bombed the Middle East? Well, the trick question is that they all did. And I think it's an important point that the person makes here. Every country the U.S. has attacked in the 21st century and which presidents authorized the strikes. Now, that's not even close to the full list, by the way, but it's important for the mainstream acknowledged ones. But if you look very clearly, Afghanistan, Bush, Obama, Biden, Trump. Iran, just Trump. Iraq, Bush, Biden, Obama, Trump. Libya, Obama, Trump. Nigeria, just Trump. Pakistan, Bush, Obama, and Trump. Somalia, Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Syria, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Venezuela, just Trump. Yemen, Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Anybody note the consistency, the one consistent factor in almost every one of those? Trump. I mean, this is actually incredible to me when you look at it this clearly, that you can argue whatever you want about, like I said, the rationale. Well, he needed to because of blah, blah, blah. Well, that's maybe so. The argument was no more wars. The argument was peace, President. What if not except unless it's necessary? That's not what you said. So here we are, where Iran, Nigeria, and Venezuela, in this case, Venezuela is more of a nuanced point, but it depends on what you would argue are the kind of actions we're dealing with. But just direct bombing like this, Trump has taken it to a new level, starting new wars, and we just have to come to terms with that. So, but the main point was, it's not left and right, guys. Not Trump versus Biden. Our entire government is part of this problem. Salman Ahmed pointing out that the U.S. government is striking the state broadcasting headquarters, which, by the way, is not a military target, regardless of what they want to claim it's used for. And the end point is that they're censoring. Now, what's funny is they're always talking about them restricting access and so on, which they do because of what's happening. But then you have things like this where they bomb infrastructure and they bomb the broadcasting and say they're censoring and they're restricting access. Well, it's both to some degree, but overall, these are crimes. As he says, rightly so, this is straight from the regime change playbook. And here is a bigger example Max highlighted. Today, the U.S. Israel coalition attacked the following civilian targets in residential areas of Iranian cities: IRIB offices targeting journalists and media workers for exposing war crimes, the Gandhi Hospital, so here we go again, the Abu Zar Hospital in Ahvaz, and 2 apartment towers. The consistency of their war crimes is kind of baffling by the fact that it just continues to happen. So we're talking about hospitals. And of course, when we get to the point about the children being bombed, it's always the same thing. How dare you? That's not true. And then they go on to bomb a bunch more schools. Or like they point out about the bombing of was it Ali Hospital in the very beginning of that. And everybody, oh, that's not true. That's not, they lied about it. Everyone's getting missed. And then they went on to bomb every other hospital, and they said they did. But, because tunnels or whatever. Well, then why did you take so much time? Couldn't you just send tunnels in the beginning? Because it never had been okay before that. Tunnels or otherwise. And it's still not now. But they just literally dragged the conversation into an acceptable point where it's okay to bomb 400 innocent people to allegedly maybe get one person and turn out not to be there. That's what Wolf, talking to Wolf Blitzer. I can't believe how clearly they've been moving this along. And the reality is, like, it's everything else we're seeing everywhere. Every conversation, they're trying to drag us further into a new reality of how things operate. Drop site news, new strike damages eighth hospital or emergency base in 2 days of the U.S. Israeli attack on Iran. 8th. Photos and videos from inside the Gandhi Hospital show debris scattered across floors, nurses evacuating newborn infants to safer areas. What does Trump think about this? Images released by Iran's health ministry show at least 2 children in black body bags inside the facility. An overall casualty toll was not available. It just never ceases to amaze me how clearly they're trying to make these things happen. He said 21 patients, including ICU cases, were transferred by 30 ambulances. For the first time in my life, he says, never even saw this during the Iraq-Iran war. So interestingly, we have an argument that's being disputed, that the Iranian strike on the UAE location actually took out 6 CIA officers. Here's the actual report that's citing from the Tasnim agency. It's already translated. It says, according to the defense reporter, Tasnim news agency, they basically said that the missile attack in the UAE on one of the CIA residences of the U.S. government in the location. And it says, as a result, senior CIA officials were killed. And the reports are developing elsewhere. The point overall that they killed CIA agents. I just think it's relevant as it goes forward, as they're denying it. Also showing you that they're absolutely operating in this field, and which is not a secret, but still understand that they're out there conducting intelligence operations and lying to everybody everywhere they can. And the White House Post, which seems to come directly from True Social, which is embarrassing, says, destroyed 9 Iranian ships. Now, I haven't been able to fully verify this, but just like every other point, we should take it with a grain of salt because they lie about this stuff all the time. And it very well may be that Trump is the one being lied to by Israel, which has happened before, where they use him to put out false information that makes him look dumb and they get what they want out of it. And he never calls it out. He says, quote, I have just been informed. See? So who knows if that means our government, military, which would be interesting, that we have destroyed and sunk 9 Iranian naval ships, which is a huge deal if that's the reality. And then, ask yourself why this would not be immediately, you think this is going to amount to them doing nothing? This is full-scale war, guys. This is Trump committing full-scale war with an unjustified act. There's not a response. This is not a preemptive anything. This is an attack on a foreign country with no legal justification, and then you're just continuing. They respond, and you keep going further because Israel wants this to go further. And it says some of them are relatively large and important. We're going after the rest. You're even stating out loud that we're going to keep going to all your ships. Okay, why wouldn't Iran be bombing everything they can right now? Like from a legal perspective, like what would you think the U.S. government, when sitting back, when Iran says we're going to go after every one of your ships, we're bombing them right now, what do you think Trump will be doing? Trump will be bombing Iran in every way he can. Why isn't Iran doing that? I'm not advocating for that at all, but I think it's an important question to be asking. We're going to come back to that in a second. Raising the bar, how the IDF gained air superiority in 24 hours. The same thing. Now, there are some ways to be able to check more so, but I know that they have ways to circumvent GPS and whatever else. The point, though, is that take it with a grain of salt. But they're reporting that they have taken control of the air, which, if this is all true, which doesn't seem to make it necessarily make sense with what we're still seeing, meaning that it feels like these are what they want you to think is happening based on what was going on right now. I feel like we'd be seeing different reactions if this is actually what happened. But again, it very well could be. Like with Syria, a lot that went down there happened so quickly, and I didn't think it was the reality. And it happened, and it's about building this into the point. What they've been doing has been building to this point, as we're going to show you, where Netanyahu literally tells you, I've been telling you where we're going to get to here. But if they gain superiority of the airspace, meaning they control the airspace, and they've bombed 9 of these ships, well, that would be very, very, very bad for the Iranian government, and they might well be being, removed from power. I wouldn't have argued that's the case if that's what's happening. I wouldn't have thought that was what was legitimately the circumstance. There's been a lot of blustering. But again, we'll literally have to wait to see how this ends up. Because everyone in the partisan game loves to scream about what they think they know in the midst of when this is happening, and how often it turns out to be the opposite or false or none of it. It just baffles me how they keep doing it. So this is interesting. On top of it, the Cradle reported that the U.S. government said the U.S. embassy in Beirut has announced its closure starting tomorrow. Well, that's interesting, seeing as how they talked about the diplomats in Israel, and then we saw action, which in the past is, it's never a full guaranteed indication that something's going to happen. They love, Russia removed their diplomats, and Jones will scream about it for 2 days and nothing happens. Like that happens, and it is an indication it should ignore it, but it doesn't always mean that something's about to happen. It could just mean that they sense something, or it could mean they want you to think that, right? But so in this case, based on what we just saw, and what they're already doing, my mindset was, okay, this is, and by the way, Israel's currently illegally occupying Lebanon right now, and they've been continually violating the ceasefire that no one talks about. And on top of that, they've been bombing Lebanon and trying to overthrow them and take their territory forever. They already have plans to take the areas over and turn them into Israeli settlements. They have maps for it. I mean, they as in the Israeli government, people like Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, rather more so Smotrich, I believe, but openly talking about this. Okay, and then the IDF claims today, sirens sounding in northern Israel following projectiles from Lebanon. How interesting is that? So 2 things to think here. One is either that Israel is claiming that because they want to create justification to do what they already say, what we already seem to get indication they're going to do, and by the way, have already been doing. Or it was a bomb that had nothing to do with the current circumstance, and it's just the ongoing part of their engagement. I guess 3 things. Or what I think is probably more likely is that Lebanon saw them closing the, tomorrow something's going to happen. And Lebanon said, we know what's happening. Take the first step. Because they do, guys. It's obvious what Israel's been doing. It's not a secret. It's just the game has always been about whether it makes sense within the global conversation. With what Trump and the U.S. and Israel are doing right now, that game is over. They're like, there's no logical reason for them to care about the UN, to care about international law, which is where Trump and Israel have driven us to, on the edge of genuine chaos. To the closer point that I've ever seen in my life, because they claim they're the bad guy, the other side. And as they're continually trying to, it's showing you that they're either that Trump's being dragged, or that and Israel is making this happen regardless, or that they both want to bring us here. Saeed Abbas, the foreign minister of Iran, says we've had 2 decades to study defeats of the U.S. military to our immediate east and west. We've incorporated lessons accordingly. Bombings in our capital have no impact on our ability to conduct war. That's what they're claiming, is they've obliterated everything. Decentralized mosaic defense enables us to decide when and how war will end. Now, of course, he could be just saying that to project strength, right? But we'll see. And it's worth considering that maybe, makes sense, right? They're not stupid, and they recognize what they've always done. And so they've effectively, by his argument, if that's true, decentralize what they're doing to the point to where they can't cut the head off the snake with a bomb in a certain location. Makes sense, doesn't it? Now, what was this one? One more note for myself. And the last one, I think, it was one I was going to say earlier. Right. And that's what I said I was going to come back to. And I think it's an important point to think about. Like, okay, first of all, from a legal, international law, military standpoint, they were just attacked. And every international body has been clear. That was unprovoked. It was a crime. But I guess that means nothing because no one's doing anything about it. So it was an unprovoked, illegal attack. And that means they have a right to respond, whether it was an attack, whatever kind of attack. International law is very clear. They can respond. And by the way, let's just stop calling that self-defense. It's not self-defense to respond to an attack. Self-defense would be defending yourself from that attack. It's a small difference, but I think it matters. And I'm frustrated that we use their terms, whether Iran or Israel, because they always go, I have a right to defend myself, and then initiate an attack. Even if it's in response to an attack that took place the days before, that's not defending yourself, guys. Let's just stop playing these games. But it is still a legal, justified attack based on international law, not necessarily my opinion. The reality being that it's stated clearly that if you're attacked, you have the right to respond. And that's where the belligerent point comes in. They have the legal right to respond to the belligerents involved with that. The UAE, the groups that have allowed them to make this happen. So the question becomes, with that legal reality, which is it's clearly stated fact, why has Iran not bombed the United States? I hope that doesn't happen. That's the last thing that anybody should be calling for. But it's true. There's many points to be made within that question. They have, the U.S. is right this moment bombing them in Tehran, in the middle of their capital. So why wouldn't they go bomb back their capital? Because that would be legally justified, right? Because they know that that's going to spin this further. That's my opinion. They know that Trump is either blindly being driven here or a part of it, and Israel's belligerent to the point to where if they take further action, they will take further action even more. And it shows you that what you're dealing with are people that are playing basically nuclear chicken, and they're willing to take it all the way. And so who is the bad guy in that situation? Who is the belligerent? Who is the maniac? The one who's trying to walk it back, or the one that's trying to not let it happen, even though they have the right to respond, or the one who's constantly poking and driving to where they make that the reality? What do you think Israel would do? Israel would have already responded. You know what they would do. And if this was the reverse situation, the same way. And so on top of that, it's what it highlights for you is the restraint. That Iran is in this position, has the legal justification to do damn near anything at this point. I shouldn't say it like that, but they could make it justified based on what Israel's been saying forever, and they don't. And instead, they selectively bomb certain locations, which seems to be very carefully made out to where they're barely hurting any civilians. If, like, as far as I can tell, I mean, there's disputed reports, but disputed is all you're getting about civilians. Very well may be that none of them have been killed, and only those 3 U.S. servicemen that we're talking about, and then I believe it was 1 person in Israel. And that's, to think about what they're talking about, with all the bombings that have happened, and that's the fallout. And over here, you got a first attack, 100 children killed, and it's only gotten worse. So that, to me, is a deliberate effort to bomb military targets while you're being targeted. They're bombing civilian locations. I mean, all it's showing you is that Iran's government is not what they continually tell you they are, because they've had opportunities. They've got legal cover to do terrible things, and they didn't. I mean, there could be another reason why they didn't do those things. Maybe they're just biding their time. But you have to consider that. And I mean, this is just one of 1,000 points constantly showing you these people are not what they're being shown to be. Now, Israel Radar says Trump realizes the Iranian regime will not fall immediately. Aims to end military operation soon, and the proposed ceasefire. Now, here's where it comes from. This is Ynet News. We mainstream Israeli media. Trump seeks swift end to Iran operation. Now, in my experience, what Israel reports tends to be the reality, especially when it's embarrassing for the U.S. government. That happens often. That doesn't mean always. But it says, on the eve of the strike on Iran, U.S. officials envisioned a 4 to 5 day operation that would return a weakened Tehran to the negotiating table. This is always such a classic. When has that ever happened? And then if that happens, all you're really doing is saying we bombed you to weakness to where we can get whatever we want. Why wouldn't you just keep bombing them into nothing then? From their perspective, the end of the day, they always claim this is about negotiate. It's not, guys. It's about war. It's about power and control, and using that military might to force people to get what you want. And on top of that, I don't think they ever wanted to negotiate here. definitely not Israel, because as we just showed you yesterday, they were about to make a deal, as Oman foreign minister told you. And the moment they were saying we're willing to accept all of your demands, Israel created justification to bomb, or rather they had always planned to, and then they just did it on the back of that agreement, because the reports are saying that they had planned that ahead of time. But it says, according to one source, an American official conveyed an even more immediate proposal. Through a mediator, apparently Italy, he suggested reaching a ceasefire agreement today or tomorrow. Iran rejected the idea outright. Now, that is not, I mean, think about what that means for you if you're Donald Trump. If this is the reality, which I believe it is, you create this, or Israel drags you into it, and you don't want to be doing this because it's hurting you in every possible way. And so you try to make a ceasefire agreement. And Iran, who's usually the one that's willing to go to the table, even as you threaten and cajole and lie, and they just flatly reject it. I mean, to me, if I'm Trump, I'm going, oh crap. Okay, that means they are decided, peace is off the table because of what you did. And of course, they're going to spin around and go, see, they never wanted peace, even though that's so stupidly not the case. And every example shows you the opposite, but their same old screamers will pretend that's the reality. And I think it shows you that a dangerous point has been met where Iran is flirting with dangerous options that they have the legal justification to carry out because of what the U.S. government and Israel have created here. Oh, wait, there was another point at the bottom I forgot about. So it says down here, damn it, come on, there we go. The attack on Iran is, oh, that's right. This is an Israeli media report. An attack on Iran is highly unpopular in the United States. Just hope that's being felt by the people who keep pretending that's not the case, both among Trump's critics and his staunch supporters. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the current operation marks an unprecedented peak, high point in U.S. Israel alliance. That is true in terms of military cooperation. In other words, the U.S. government is doing Israel's bidding. It is not true in a broader sense, it writes, because the alliance is not between Israel and America as a whole, but between Israel and the sitting president. Yeah, that's true, but it's also the whole government. But make the point, they just hear even the Israeli media saying Trump's the one. He's the reason we're getting what we want right now. And it says for the United States, this is a war of choice. For Israel, it's a war of necessity. Well, no, it's not really. It's a war of choice for you too. But think about that. They're literally going, Trump's doing it because he wants to. We have to. So if you're an American and a peace president and no more wars, and Israel's going, Trump wants to do this, I think that just has to mean something to you. Now, this is an important point because it brings in a very interesting element to this about whether, that Israel is controlling U.S. policy. What I think this represents is either it just is the reality, or that this is the Trump team trying to create a narrative that then that lets them not completely fall to this lie. Or rather, whether it's, a lot of things, Epstein and everything included, but because this is so shockingly unpopular, that they create a narrative that then makes it sound like Trump was the forlorn hero that had to do the bad thing because Israel's so evil. But then what's happening is you have the Republicans ultimately admitting that Israel's evil and controls U.S. policy because they have no other choice, because they need to take back support. So let's play the clip first, and it's John Kirikow making this argument. And I don't agree with some points, and I'll wait till the end to share it. And then I'll read what JD had to say as well.
The reason that Donald Trump decided to bomb Iran was that the Israelis said, if you don't bomb Iran to take out these deep bunkers, we're going to use nuclear weapons. And they had never threatened that before. And so Trump said, bombing Iran might actually save us from the start of World War III.
Sorry, they did threaten that before, by the way.
If it keeps the Israelis from using nuclear weapons.
So according to your source, the Israelis told the President of the United States that if he did not use the United States military power to bomb the nuclear facilities in Iran, Israel, acting on its own, would use nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Do you see why there's a problem with that statement, John?
Yeah.
Because they've never fucking admitted that they've had them.
That's right.
So you're telling me that they just admitted to the President of the United States that they have nuclear weapons and we still do not have them in the IAEA treaty?
I mean, if...
What's funny to me is this is like edge of your seat gripping. It's like, This is publicly available information for 15 years. but I get it. There's a lot of people that are just coming around with the conversation. But it's just funny to me that this young new podcaster is apparently super now. It's just funny. This to me is a controlled release of information. Doesn't make it false at all. In fact, it makes it very real and important, rather just Israel influencing policy. I'll get to the more nuanced discussion of what's being said here. But isn't it interesting? Like, do you see the problem there, John, that they've got nukes? And we all know, yeah, man, they've actually admitted that casually before. Netanyahu has been caught in like 3 different meetings, basically admitting that and looking sluggishly stupid or sheepishly, I think it's funny. Anyway, sorry, I should have stopped it.
That they've had them.
That's right.
So you're telling me that they just admitted to the president of the United States that they have nuclear weapons and we still do not have them in the IAEA treaty?
I mean, if Israeli nuclear whistleblowers are to be believed, yeah, they started working on them in the 50s. They got them around the late 60s or the early 70s.
It's called nuclear ambiguity, guys. There's literally a term for what it is. I mean, it's funny to me that he would even equivocate about that. But we should question John, CIA, like everybody else. But he has information that's relevant. It's like the point we make about Tucker. I believe that there's a level of that's sort of released information, but he makes points that I still think are valid. I'll still point to him. Or Massey, for example. It should not be about the person. It should be about the content, guys. But the person matters, though, right? It's a secondary point, and it does make a difference, but the content is what matters. And so what we're talking about here is an interesting development, isn't it? I just have to laugh at that. It's all like serious, and it's like the missile. It's just funny to me. Like it's recapturing the momentum of something that's been there forever. And who knows? Maybe it's genuine. Maybe that's just a good way to frame it to where you get momentum. To each their own. You can decide for yourself. But just know that you've heard us talk about that for a decade. But this is what he had to say about this. And I think this is important to think about. Because of what I said, then I'll make that point again at the end about just, Israel and what their Republican Party seems to be doing here. JD writes, listen to me carefully. This support's not as important. He says, I know John and I trust him, I guess. Basically, where was it? The feds tried to kill him and, whatever. I mean, you shouldn't trust anybody. You should consider the information, question where it comes from. Maybe he was deceived, right? It's like any other situation. But it says, Kirikow here confirms what I've been telling you for months. Israel has a nuke to our heads. Now, I agree with that. In a very real sense. That does not mean that Trump or Biden or anybody else is not in some way in line with that agenda, because you can see it elsewhere. But guys, you can go back and argue that in maybe from the very beginning, day one, each one of them have been threatened and blackmailed. And look, to be very, I guess, sorry, word for it. Like, just to be honest, this would make them, it would suggest to some degree that they might not have done this otherwise. That's the most accurate way to say that. I think these people are pretty clearly the kind of people that we've seen them. I mean, they show you this in every point of their life, okay? But that doesn't mean that they would have done this if it wasn't for the Israel threatening or forcing or whatever else, or Epstein files, for example, right? But just because that then lessens, let's say, the responsibility, it doesn't change the fact that they're still accountable for what they've been doing, for the fact that they don't, like right now, what do you think with that position? Would it be the right thing to do to just let war happen and kill innocent people because otherwise Israel does something worse? I mean, I don't know. That's just, it doesn't make sense to me. That is a zero. It's an always, it ends up in the same way every time. We're only bad. That's the lesser of evils on a global foreign policy dynamic. Do you want nukes or do you want everyone being killed? Do you want Iran war or do you want us to threaten nukes? I don't want either of those things. And if Israel is going to do that, guys, then that's something that needs to be called out. You understand that Israel right now it's called the Samson option. Seymour Hersh called this out. They are willing to bomb foreign countries if they feel like they are, and nukes, by the way, if they feel like they're about to be taken out. And that's allies included, as far as I understand it. And so what we're talking about is the fact that they could do that anytime they want. They could launch nuclear weapons anytime they want. So the idea that you would let them then threaten that, even though everyone else has them too, and let that be the deciding factor for why you then go to war for them, how does that work out in anybody's minds? Wouldn't Trump then immediately stand up and say, Israel's threatening nuclear weapons right now? Because it doesn't change the reality that they could do it whenever they want. Call it out. Try to stop that. Try to remove that ability from them. Try to, and you could also add another layer to this. And I do not think this is QAnon level territory because there's zero that backs this up, but maybe Trump is behind the scenes, carefully trying to dismantle their ability. And then suddenly it'll all come out. Save Israel for last. And all of it gets exposed. Damn, if that happens, I would love to see that. And I would be the first person to stand up and go, I love Q and I'm glad it all worked out, even though I thought it was false. But I do not think that's going to happen because the facts don't back that up. But he says, since 1973, they've had the U.S. over a barrel to either support their bloodiest agenda in the region or face the prospects of nuclear war. We've been their hostage. You see, now I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think we can prove that's exactly how it went down, but I do agree with the sentiment, whether it's blackmail or nukes or whatever else. And according to Kirikow, Israel told Trump plainly. I don't know how you would know this. Like his source can tell him, but it's third generation, or rather, how would you say it? Like third person removed information. Consider it though, that he says bomb Iran or we will do with nukes. Now, why wouldn't they have done this any other situation? Like, couldn't they have made the same threat to Biden or Obama or Bush? Why wouldn't they have done it then? They're far weaker now. They're like right now, the whole world sees them. They could have done this under Bush or Obama. They would have gotten away with it. This doesn't make sense to me, guys. Not that the situation's real, but that they're doing this now. To me, it's more likely that Trump is in line with this agenda, that they're or that he's being blackmailed with the Epstein files would make far more sense to me. And my point is not that nukes are not relevant, but rather that's not the deciding factor in all of this. But it says this is the Samson protocol, he writes, and I told you about it over and over. That psychopathic war cult is playing a game of nuclear chicken with us. And in that we agree. You've got to understand, he says, every nuclear expert on Earth concedes that if one nuke flies, they all do. Now, that tends to be the kind of prevailing logic, but I don't know if that's the case. I mean, if you think it through, the argument is the whole self-assured destruction idea. That's why they're there and everyone fires them, and Israel doesn't seem to care about any of that. But then if a nuke flies, the argument is that they are able to detect that. But then I don't understand. I mean, I would argue that the path, what's the word I'm looking for? Where it's going would ultimately be able to be deciphered. And so I would argue that it wouldn't be some immediate response that just everybody launches nukes because, I mean, thirdly, because that would mean they all know that what we're doing is killing ourselves, that everyone's like, okay, we're all done. I just don't think that lines up. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but I mean, it's sound in the sense that people would react, especially if we're talking about protocol. And it's really just a military reaction, which is another reason why the reality of that is not in our interest. But all of it aside, I do believe that Israel is using coercion to force this government into action. Blackmail, nuclear threats, otherwise. But in no way do I think that should remove accountability to all the presidents that have allowed this to happen. And it says it is highly unlikely there could ever be a one-sided nuclear strike. I would agree with that. But it says that's not how the world works. Israel's playing with the lives of every person on earth because they worship, and he says, demons. Our biggest problem is not Islamic extremism. Our biggest problem is Israelis with nukes strapped around their nation's waist like a Jewish suicide vest. And if you don't think that little godforsaken desert trailer park hasn't made the greatest nation on earth their proxy and vassal state, you're wrong. So, whatever. Take his opinion for what you will. The reality is, I think that there's some truth to the threat. But I also argue this is being used right now to make Trump look like he's not the problem. But like I said to start, there's only two ways or one really way you can take that, is that then proves that one, Israel's a maniac willing to kill everybody to get what it wants, and two, that it is influencing, rather dictating U.S. policy through Trump at the very least, but I think it's the whole government. So realize where we are, guys. We're at a point right now where everyone in this country is being forced to come to terms with that reality, even grudgingly so, because they don't want to be seen for the criminals they are. You know why that's happening? It's because of you. You made that happen. Now, on the bombing of children, that seems just be, which one, Ryan? Gaza, Syria? Yeah, it's a good question. The one that they just killed in Iran. Hundreds of children, people buried under rubble. Came out, and Max here came out and lied about it. And so did other people. And they put out a fake image that you can immediately show was not even close to the location that it actually took place in. Because in that location, there was no snow in the mountains. And in the picture they shared, there's snow in the mountains. That was easily identifiable in the beginning. Now, that's just that specific location, by the way, not just everywhere in Iran. It's a big country. In this case, even Grok said, nope, that's not the place they say it is. It's actually an older picture. Now, then you got these same people that came in and said, oh, actually, the whole thing didn't happen. It was actually an old video from Afghanistan. And then, other people said Pakistan. Both were actually false, by the way, but this is what you get from partisans, guys. And I simply said it never fails with these monsters. They kill children, and their minions online rush to lie about it. So following up on this story, what we got is the same people you expect. Here's Noah Berg, one of the most prolific manipulators on this platform for specifically Israeli agendas. And she says, breaking, The regime in Iran has now confessed that they had bombed the school. They did not. And the account they're pointing to is a classically known manipulated propaganda campaign that pretends to be representing Iran opinions. But on top of all of that, this has been proven multiple ways, including the one I showed you first. Citizen journalist says, no, they didn't, but it turns out you're another idiot who will happily regurgitate anything that fits with your narrative. I think she's knowingly lying, but cites what we had seen earlier in the day. Geo confirmed statement regarding our post about the bombing of the girls' elementary school reportedly resulting in the deaths of over 100 girls. Because many readers still misunderstood our post on how geolocation verification works, I will explain it as simply as possible. The girls' school was located next to a military base, which does not make it a military target, and according to multiple sources, even within the perimeter of the base. That wasn't true. However, this does not make it a legitimate target under the law, even if it was in it, but it was not. Even if it was within the premises. The school was not in Pakistan or Afghanistan, as some suggest, because the location is geo-confirmed. The footage is not old. In Iran, and by the way, he's repeating it, but you can go through, and he goes through this too specifically, and I'll show you that too. It says, in Iran, schools are open Saturday to Thursday. In fact, the school located in Minab was destroyed based on the footage. Number two, the claim that the explosion was caused by a failed Iranian missile. The widely circulating footage, and it says get no support at this time, no evidence, because there's not. The widely circulated footage to support this theory originates from a location approximately 1,300 kilometers away from the school. It is impossible that a missile failure visible there caused the bombing at the... So it didn't happen, guys. There is no possibility where there's an overlap for that based on the evidence. But you could keep going further if you truly wanted to keep going. The reality is clear from the very first point. The obvious reality, guys, is these people lie about everything all the time. Richard Tice, MP from the UK, comes out and says, turns out Iran killed these children. Yeah. And gets 500,000 views on it. You see what I mean? Like, this is what this platform is leaning into the carefully constructed, or I take it back, the lazy, clumsy argument that they think aligns with their agenda. But that's what they do. Now, last few things to finish with here, important, both about the killing of American citizens and the people they want to take control of Iran. U.S. Central Command came out and said that 3 Americans have died. Service members, military, right? So there's no place in which you can call this terrorism. There's no place in which you can call this anything other than military engagement, because they started the fight. They bombed Iran, killed a bunch of innocent people, and then Iran seems to have carefully responded to military targets. Because what we're getting, unless they're lying about it, which they might because they don't want to look weak, is 3 Americans were killed who are military, and apparently, unless it's changed since I last checked, 1 Israeli was killed. And we're talking, in every possible sense, what we're talking about is the opposite of indiscriminate bombing of civilian targets. So as I said, the U.S. government is almost entirely responsible for their deaths. Almost entirely, because clearly Iran did launch the bomb, so they're responsible for the bomb being launched. But the reality is the U.S. government is what made this happen, knowing that military targets would then be legal targets. Not illegal, legal targets under international law. So I said, in what world is that America first? In any sense. Anything they're doing right now. Well, you already know the answer. In fact, I don't even need to make that point because I think most Republicans are already coming to this term. But the reality is you're putting American lives at risk. And then you're coming out and going, you know what? Oh, wait, this is the wrong one. Oh, that's just this here is the same post. Trump pledges to avenge fallen U.S. service members as tensions with Iran intensify. In fact, I think that just updated. Was it this one? Okay, no, that's the one. So this one first. Pledges. Well, actually, let's do this first because that's the actual point. So the argument being that Americans were killed, and that's because of their actions. And then Trump comes out and says there will be more U.S. deaths. That's actually what he said in Iran before the conflict ends. U.S. service member, just in case that was unclear the way I said that. More Americans will be killed. Well, I mean, why is this America first? Why is this the peace president? Why is this no more wars? Yeah, they are still relevant despite the fact that everyone sees it. Israel launched multiple strikes on Lebanon's capital, Beirut, after the Lebanese military group fired missiles. Yep, see how that works? Which, by the way, they've been doing back and forth forever. So now this gets turned into, see, Iran made that happen. No, it's been going on for a long time. And every time in regard to Lebanon and Israel, there was engagement, really Hezbollah. That wasn't every single time because of Iran over there, even though they always make that argument. It was because Israel's invading Lebanon. Israel's occupying Lebanese territory. But now, because people are stupid, apparently, it's going to become Iran just bombed them from Lebanon. Even though you can argue that Lebanon did that because they're in solidarity with Iran. But it's not the same thing. And it says the Israeli military said it intercepted a projectile that crossed the border, saying nothing happened, because they always do. Now, there was a point that is updated. Let's see. Well, I wanted to read that part, but I don't know how far down it went. It was simply just that he's claiming that more will die. So let's just wrap this up in general, because I want to get the MEK part. It says Trump pledges to avenge fallen U.S. service members. So let's remember, he reached out and tried to do a ceasefire, and they said absolutely not. And so now he's all gung ho, bounding his, I don't think they wanted you to hear that, by the way. That was Israeli media that let that slip out. But so now he's out there banging his chest, going, "Oh, we're going to take them all out." Well, you just meekly tried to call for a ceasefire, if that's accurate. I do believe it is. As tensions, and what this shows you is they are going to continue. What do you mean avenge them? You bombed them, they responded. That's an even playing field now. Avenging them is you going back and attacking again. That's not that is you being the belligerent. Everyone can see this right now, guys. And what really takes the cake? This is Netanyahu coming out, and you can see it on the right. You can see, this is what I promised. Benjamin Netanyahu speaks from the roof of the IDF headquarters. Again, who knows if that's a fake background? To me, the fact that he did that seems to make you think he wants you to believe he's there. He very well could be. But if it's considered that he flew out already, that may be them trying to make you think that. Interesting, right? But anyway, says the war in Iran is about to intensify so much that, quote, painful days are coming. So Trump's going, more U.S. members are going to die. Netanyahu is saying this is going to get a lot worse. So why do Americans want that right now? What is in the interest of Americans in any of this? Netanyahu says he will unleash the full force of the IDF that the world has never seen before. Okay. To what? Or to the response of you attacking them? Like, wasn't the argument that they were going to do this to bring this to peace or to reduce the... No, this is Netanyahu. Like, once it starts, we're going all the way out no matter what, because bad guys. So all it shows you is that what they said beginning was not true. There's no air in that conversation. They lied to you about what they wanted, and then when they got the opportunity, they bull rush into it because Trump is going to let them do what they want. Netanyahu says he has waited 40 years for this moment. This is what I promised. How do you misunderstand that? They've been trying to make this happen for 40 years. He's been manipulating the U.S. government for 40 years. And then he's told you, I will get this done. But recognize it's in Hebrew. You know why? Because this is not a message for Americans. It's a message for Israelis. Look at what I did. I got the U.S. government to do this for you. I've been telling you for 40 years I would get them to do this for you. And here we are. I've been waiting for this, and we did it. Think about that, guys. And now we're at a point where they're trying to tell you, no, this is a reaction to evil Iran. They just did this because they're defending themselves for 40 years, right? It was a preemptive attack for something for 40 years ago. This is how dumb that they think we are. They're laughing at you. Preemptive attack, planning it for 40 years. It's insulting to our intelligence. Adam Cochran shows what Dan Pfeiffer's here says, and it says, this is something disturbingly surreal. This is that clip I showed you earlier. That after launching a regime change war in the Middle East, Donald Trump openly speaks to the nation through hastily edited video statements released on state-run media platforms. So again, they release a pre-recorded address to the nation. Trump says the operations will continue until all objectives are achieved, showing you it's not ending. This is going full blow until Israel gets what it wants. Trump calls on Iranians to seize the moment to take back their country. Think about that, guys. That's blatant. That is interference. You are calling for insurrection. Can you imagine what he would do if the same thing was happening in reverse? Okay. So Adam says they also had no officials on Sunday shows. Something's wrong. And I agree. They're like wrong or just different. No one's trying to address the people. Trump's administration's not going on the show. There's something weird happening. I agree. I don't know exactly what that would be fleshed out as, but the truth is, I think that they're playing this really close to the chest because I think what we're being presented with is not even close to the reality. Well, one of the things we discussed very well may be that reality that Trump is being, forced into this doesn't make him a good guy. My guess was he expected a smoother operation and that it would quickly fold Iran, despite warnings from top generals, right? Which same thing I argued, that Iran is not going to just be toppled immediately. It's not as weak as they pretend they are. Now they are realizing they've just galvanized the same regime and have no choice but to overcommit to save face instead of admitting a screw up. Worth your consideration. I agree. There's something definitely weird going on. This is the reality, though, whatever the reason is. They're putting out pre-recorded things. They're editing these things. They're not speaking to the American people. They're not going on the shows. Well, we'll wait and see what happens. But I do agree that something feels a bit off. Now, in regard to what may happen next, and if I'm going to give you my just kind of gut feeling right now, I honestly don't think this will amount to the changing of the government. I think that what we're going to see is the effort to do so, and it's so shockingly unpopular that I think that there's going to be an ongoing exchange. Well, I mean, I don't want to get too far into predicting it, but what I think based on that point would be ultimately that there'd be continued bombings and that Trump at some point is going to have to pull back on this because nobody here wants that, and that will force Israel into some kind of repositioning of the situation. And just like we've seen many times in the past, where they assassinate a scientist or they kill somebody and then they readjust and things continue. And they go right back to the same arguments about Iran and missiles and the same thing. If this turns into another Syria, guys, there's no misunderstanding this. This is the Greater Israel Project. They're taking over countries around them. Lebanon's next. They're telling you Turkey's coming after that. And Trump wants you to tell you this is peace. Well, the people that they want to put in place, just like in Syria, like Jolani, by the way, are monsters. As I told you before, directly from basic, like surface level information, the Shah created an oligarchy. He created a despotic reality for almost everybody other than the Western elitist Iranians and Israelis and U.S. entities and, whatever, Western entities. Pahlavi, Jerusalem Post reports, that's the Shah's son. Iran is not Iraq, he says. Nation will hold free elections, establish ties with Israel. Right. It sounds nice. Israel is the point. Free elections. Come on, guys. You mean unless we it's like with Palestine or anything else. An election, unless the U.S. doesn't like what happens, and then you can have a free election amongst these four people, or whatever they do. It's just pathetic. They're not. You think Iranians are going to elect the dictator it's just the reality is not what they're presenting. What I'm trying to highlight for you is that this is who they want you to think is going to be leading the country in one example. Now, otherwise, well, actually, I forgot if this was included as well. Miriam Adelson is currently sitting together with the Iranian crown prince at Mar-a-Lago. This is right now, or rather the recent picture. They're watching Iran get bombed. How do we miss this, guys? How do people not see what's really going on in the world? Now, here's another example. And this is somebody we've talked about for a long time. Miriam Rajavi, the cult of Rajavi. This is Just the News reporting, and this was the 28th. It says the National Council of Resistance on Iran and an anti-Iranian regime group announced on Saturday a provisional government to transfer sovereignty to the Iranian people and establish a democratic republic after the United States and Israel launched strikes against the regime. Sort of like the Democratic, whatever it is, like what are the group, the Syrian Democratic Forces are fighting for those are terrorists, guys. They were supported. Those were the moderate rebels. They use these words because they think that makes them, what we're talking about is the MEK, as you're going to see. These are very dangerous people. And it says the organization also publicly outlined a 10-point plan for the country's future after the U.S. and Israel will destroy the country, apparently. In these difficult circumstances, they write, I call for all of you, especially the courageous youth of our country, now very unpopular in Iran, by the way, to call for civilians and the general public, particularly children and the elderly. Protect them and help one another. Now is the time for solidarity, unless you're Iranian people and we hate you, or people that support the Iranian government and they want to murder them and they carry out terrorist attacks and they bomb. Not a joke. I don't believe for a second that she means any of this. This is according to Miriam Rajavi. The 10-point plan includes, this is what they write, freedom of speech, freedom of political parties, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. This is just a go-to of what everyone loves to pretend they're doing. Ask Bukele. It's all freedom unless we don't like you and you go to prison. We remove your civil rights and remove judges, but we'll pretend all those things. Ask Donald Trump. It's all free speech. Ask Elon Musk. It's all free speech. And then they censor people and they lie about it. Like all the autocrats in the world, they love to pretend they care about free speech and political party. They don't, guys. You can look at the MEK's own information and they do not believe in any of this. And it says, as well as the dissolution of and disbranding of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and just everything that's Iran right now. And it says the group plans call for commitment to individual and social freedoms and the rights in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Sure. Sounds great, right? Well, let's take a look at what they do. Then this is the MEK. This is what they're one of the many acronyms for this group. Now, this is just from the surface. This is Wikipedia, guys. The carefully cultivated, surface level, state controlled conversation. So let's take a look at even what this has to say. There is so much in here, by the way. I tend to think a lot of these kind of groups are buried with like over information. Like this goes on forever. And I think that's by design so that you just, nobody's like, I'm not going to, let me get into some of the points I think are relevant. So first, I think this one's first, actually, right here. And I guess that was the first one. Okay, under the cult. The MEK has been described as a cult, because it is, by the way, and has also been described as a cult by the U.S. government. According to a RAND Corporation report for the U.S. government, during Rajavi's, and this was Mahmoud Rajavi, one of the family members, and during the ideological revolution, members were required to give near religious devotions to its leaders. So forced devotion, religious practices. Also, according to Rand, the MEK had, quote, many of the typical characteristics of a cult, such as authoritarian control, confiscation of assets, sexual control, including mandatory divorce and celibacy, emotional isolation, forced labor, sleep deprivation, physical abuse, and limited exit options. You know, the good kind of group, right? The freedom democracy groups that call for free speech. This is a group that they've been arguing should be in power as long as I've been doing this. And even right now, by the way, Newt Gingrich is right now saying they should be in charge. But so is Rudy Giuliani and you know, John Bolton and plenty of other people that have talked about this forever. And Donald Trump, by the way, more than once. So it says in 1990, the MEK leadership ordered all couples to divorce, forbade them from remarrying, and children were sent away, apparently, because they were distractions. Critics often describe the MEK as a cult of Rajavi, arguing that it revolves around the husband and wife duo. Members reportedly had to participate in regular ideological cleansings. According to Rand, again, a report from a U.S. entity put on by the U.S. government or commission, members were lured in to the group through, quote, false promises of employment, land, and aid in applying for asylum in Western countries. They're taking advantage of vulnerable people. Sounds like the Epstein network. And it says, and then preventing them from leaving. Now, Mahmoud Banisardi, how do you say that last name? Banisader, a vocal former member, and there's many of them, by the way, suggested that the MEK had become a cult in order to survive. So, foreign policy perspectives. It says in 28th of September, 2012, the U.S. State Department formally removed the MEK from its official designation as a terrorist organization. Isn't it funny how often that happens? Jelani's a good guy now. We told you he was terrible, but now we want him in charge. Saddam Hussein's a good guy. Oh, now he's a bad guy. Osama bin Laden, he's our best asset. Oh, now he's a bad guy. Well, historically, they've been the assets until they become the bad guy. Maybe we should start wondering why that's so convenient, so consistent. Maybe because these are not what they pretend them to be. Now, I don't mean not bad guys. I mean that they were always on the side of the government pretending to fight them. But in this case, it was removed, as I've told you over the years, by Hillary Clinton. This is written from Caitlin Johnstone, 2018. That time, Hillary Clinton removed John Bolton's favorite terror cult from the terror list. So Hillary Clinton removed them from the list. And now some Republicans are like, that's the team we want, even though they're very much left and very much woke in a lot of ways. It's funny how that doesn't matter when it comes to the Israel agenda. Secretary of State Clinton said in a statement that the decision was made because the MEK had renounced violence, even though they went on to commit violence every possible way you could find after that, and had cooperated in closing their Iraqi paramilitary base. It was reported that MEK was removed from the U.S. list of terrorist organizations after intensive lobbying. Gee, can you put that one together? The MEK advocated to remove itself from the list of the foreign terrorist organizations, having paid high-profile officials in the U.S. government upwards of $50,000 to give speeches calling for delisting. They've literally paid them to get off the list. And it says the National Iranian American Council denounced, this is what I mean, by the way, to being sold out to the highest bidder. Our people, these are sociopaths trying to enrich themselves and gain power. And our government, I think, has been lost to that for a long time now. And that's what you get. People that are just like, whatever, you know, you can buy me like, you know, a NASCAR advertisement, as I think it was Robin Williams famously said. The MEK advocated to remove itself from the list, having paid $50,000 to people in the U.S. government. The National Iranian American Council denounced the decision, stating, quote, it opens the door to congressional funding of the MEK. Yep, that's exactly what happened. To conduct terrorist attacks in Iran. Yes, exactly. And makes war with Iran far more likely. That's the National Iranian American Council. It says Iran state television also condemned the delisting of the group, saying that the U.S. considers MEK to be, quote, good terrorists because the U.S. is using them against Iran. Exactly. Now, under foreign relations, it says the MEK became close with secular left groups in and outside of Iran. This is just humorous to me with what's going on. In January 7th, 1986, the MEK leaders sent a 12-page letter to the comrades of the Central Committee for the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, asking for temporary asylum and a loan of $300 million to continue their revolutionary anti-imperialist actions. Israel's foreign intelligence agency, Mossad, maintains connections with the MEK to this very day, dating back to the 1990s. Just a coincidence, I guess. Until 2001, just another year, right? The MEK received support from the Taliban. You could piece all this together very easily. The MEK was also among the opposition groups receiving support from the Gulf nations, such as Saudi Arabia. It's a perfect little circle right there. In April 2012, journalist Seymour Hersh reported that the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command had trained MEK operatives at a secret site in Nevada from 2005 to 2009. According to Hersh, MEK members were trained in intercepting communications, cryptography, weaponry, and small unit tactics at the Nevada site up until President Barack Obama took office in 2009. Now, I don't even believe that means anything other than just when they lost track of the reporting. But this is surface level reporting. And this is the group that right now a very predominant and very influential Republicans want in power. Now, here is Miriam Rajavi on today. The message, and it's in another language, but the message to says Kamini's death is the death of the religious tyranny and the end of the regime. I mean, it's interesting to me that this doesn't get very much reach. Here's Newt Gingrich, literally pointing to that group and saying, this is the article we read right here, the Nation's Council of Resistance of Iran. That's Miriam speaking, saying, the provisional government to transfer sovereignty. That's Newt Gingrich. And this guy says, this is what you're advocating for? That's an actual picture. That's Miriam Rajavi right in the front, right there. Look at these people. And that you're all screaming about head covers. Look at what you're looking at right there. These people don't care about any of this, guys. Israel teams with terror group to kill Iran's nuclear scientists. U.S. officials tell NBC. That's from, 2012. That's the MEK. But they renounce violence, we're told. Here's Whitney Webb, 2018. Former MEK official exposes Saudi Arabia's covert funding of Iranian terror groups. So they're literally funding the groups they point to justify what they're doing. That's still happening to this day, guys. And whether or not those are Iranians who are doing that or not doesn't change the fact that it's not representative of the Iranian people as a whole. Hillary Clinton removing them from the list. CIA plots Iran coup, partners with terrorist groups. That's Daniel McAdams from 2018. The same group, MEK. They're plotting with them to overthrow the government. John Bolton famously said in 2019, even though he was wrong, or in 2018, that by 2019, there'd be regime change in Iran. So why are we able to pretend that this is some reactive thing when they've been telling you this was going to happen ever since this is, I've never not seen this conversation. And they will publicly get up and do this. U.S.'s Iran regime change plan, hit economy, orchestrate protests, engage MEK cult to chant democracy. 2018. This is 2020. U.S. coalition kills 30 Yemeni civilians and the U.S.-backed MEK exposed as cult. And this is just more and more and more is coming out about them. And of course, this is a clip that you can watch. This is an old clip from James Corbett. And he goes on, he addresses MEK and Miriam Rajavi in this video. And it's very powerful. And these people are not what we are told they are. And so I will end today. I was going to end with the Trump clip, but I think I'm going to give you this one because I've played it many times, but it seems important to play right now. And that is of Rudy Giuliani telling you that they're going to starve Iranians to death and that that's how you get a good revolution. And that they've been doing this with the MEK I just showed you. Now, right this moment, there are people in the MEK that are in the streets of Iran who are shooting civilians, who are burning people alive, who are doing all the stuff we're seeing. Now, that doesn't mean there's not Iranians out there doing it too. Like with January 6th or anything else, there's average people that just get caught up in things. Some of them are bad people. Some of them just don't care. Some of them don't know that they're doing it, aren't aware of what's going on. But the point is never, like, the evidence is what matters. And we can prove that they train people like this to create those kind of responses. We can prove they got caught doing that in Venezuela, where they were going, there were people fighting the government, and they got caught throwing Molotov cocktails and bombing an aid truck that turned out to be full of barbed wire and wood. That's a real story, guys. The U.S. government got caught lying about that. It's exposed that they shot people in Syria to justify that Assad did it. The same thing came out in Ukraine. The Azov movement publicly said that. So here we are, where we're doing this yet again. And the reality is they're working with these terrorist groups to create the pushback in Iran. But I'll end with the point of Giuliani, and I think it was in 2010, 2012, where he's speaking to them, because he got paid, by the way, while they were still a terrorist group, to speak to them about why this is all going to happen. Now, in fact, let me double check real quick. No, I take that back. The year, I don't believe I take back the point of while they were a terrorist group. I believe they had already been taken off the list. Regardless, he's speaking to you about what they're going to accomplish, about how they're going to manufacture starvation, and why that's how they can create regime change. There's just no way you can't see that in what we're talking about today. You can argue Trump doesn't know that. You can argue Trump has been driven here without wanting to. But that doesn't, explain Stargate program, vaccines, support of Operation Warp Speed, the double crossing of all the health discussions. I mean, any number of many factors. And then, or you could take RFK Jr. in Israel. The argument was he's probably being blackmailed. Again, I said the same thing. Maybe that would make sense to me, but it doesn't change why you wouldn't. I mean, I guess the point would be that you don't want to say something, because then they'll use that blackmail, right? They'll call you out for it. So there's a point at which you can go, like I said, maybe he would be doing something different if he wasn't in this position. But I think the most important thing is to point out that we don't know that's for sure. We don't know. We can't prove that's what's happening. So it becomes this moment where we go, I want that to be the case. So I'm going to lean into that, because I know that's not true. Oh, well, now we're assuming. Now we're using emotional opinions to guide what we want to be the case. It could be, and it could be that he hates your guts and doesn't care about Americans. It could be either of those things, or somewhere in the middle. Wait for the facts. At the moment, they're breaking the law. Forest for the trees, remember. They broke the law. The U.S. government is killing people as we speak. Biden did the same. Put him in jail for it. I agree. But right this moment, we have to start addressing the reality. We can't get caught up in the clouds about what may and may not be happening. We should be considering and talking about those things, but we need to focus on what's happening. 100 children being killed in a school has to matter. And if they do it again and again and again, 8 hospitals being bombed after what they did in Gaza, how does that not matter? You know that it does. You know that they see it. Help me draw attention to this. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you all, guys. I couldn't do this without you. You are the last American vagabond. This wouldn't exist without you. And all of the points we're making and the momentum that's happening, again, this is because of you. You out there making this happen. My show can be here, but if it's not being engaged with and shared and talked about, it means nothing. You guys are the reason this stuff gets out. So recognize that. Take a moment to realize what you've done and how much has actually changed, and then get motivated to keep going. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
So now tell me that you're not a serious threat. If the regime we're trying to overthrow sees us as a threat, you are a threat. It is a reality. The protests are getting worse. I don't know when we're going to overthrow them. It could be in a few days, months, a couple of years, but it's going to happen. They are going to be overthrown. The people of Iran obviously have now had enough. The sanctions are working. The currency is going to nothing. They're where Russia was. They're where Poland was. We see signs of young men and women saying, give me some food. We saw a sign of a man trying to sell his internal organs for $500 American, probably a fortune in Iran today. This is truly pitiful. These are the kinds of conditions that lead to successful revolution.